Magical World War I. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 201 Wings of Heaven. Charlotte looked at the meteor hammer and fell into deep thought. Julian, who came down to call her for dinner, couldn't help asking, "What's wrong with you?" Charlotte replied, "I always feel that the meteor hammer is not suitable for me." Julian nodded and agreed, "It's indeed not very suitable for you, although the orc's meteor hammer method has special force techniques and is not a martial art that relies purely on brute force. But if you don't have extraordinary strength, there are still many tricks that cannot be used." Charlotte asked thoughtfully, "What do you think about me getting a long rope and tying a dagger at one end?" Julian was shocked and shouted, "What kind of weapon is this? It can't be used at all, right?" Charlotte thought to herself, "You haven't seen it, so you don't know how fancy the rope dart can be." He pondered for a long time and said, "Find me a long rope and 2 daggers." Julian really went to help him find things. There were all kinds of weapons in Gallery's Lafayette store, and there was no shortage of ropes and ordinary daggers. In his previous life, Charlotte was a math teacher, and he had never practiced traditional martial arts, let alone rope darts. At most, he watched the short videos of junior sister Yan Yan and teacher Han Liang on Bilibili, and occasionally glanced at them. However, he was proficient in the art of orc flying knives, and now he has practiced meteor hammers, so his foundation is better than that of ordinary martial artists. He cut a long rope that Julian found into a suitable size, tied 2 short knives, snapped his fingers, and the short knife flew out, like a flash of lightning, shot to the end, and was pulled by the rope. As Charlotte stretched out her hand and shook it, the short knife bounced up and circled in the air. Charlotte combined the flying knife technique with a meteor hammer technique, and also referred to the rope dart technique he had seen. With just a little familiarity, he was able to use this weapon that had never appeared in the old world in a decent manner. Most importantly, he also had blood flame energy. Julian only looked at it for a while, and his face changed drastically, because even he could see that Charlotte's new weapon would have many disadvantages if it was used on the battlefield, and it was simply cheating to use it in a duel. With the same force, the speed of the flying knife is definitely faster than the rapier and the knight's lance. If it is a real flying knife, it will disappear after it is shot, but the rope dart can be fired repeatedly. The most important thing is that this is a world with extraordinary people, which is fundamentally different from the warriors on Earth. Julian and Charlotte are both proficient in the wings of the young dragon, and their body movements are extremely fast. They can fight around the enemy without getting close to the enemy. He remembered his dagger that he had not sold yet, and decided to withdraw it immediately. When he returned to Baron, he would equip another blood-sucking dagger and find an alchemy master to make a set of extraordinary rope darts. Charlotte tried it once, put away the rope dart, and suddenly shook his head. Just as he was about to speak, Julian said, "The dagger has been sold." Charlotte smiled and said, "That's not what I wanted to say. Although this weapon is better than I expected, it also has a disadvantage, which is that it cannot penetrate the armor of enemies with strong defense." Julian suddenly realized and thought, "The other dagger cannot be a vampire weapon. I need to find a short weapon with armor-breaking and magic-breaking properties." Charlotte threw this temporary rope dart to Julian. Without the armor-breaking property, this rope dart would definitely not be able to break Ben Landlock's Frost Dragon fighting spirit. The heavy meteor hammer was more reliable. Even if the meteor hammer was not a supernatural weapon, the weight alone and the huge kinetic energy after swinging it would make any supernatural avoid it. When Charlotte fought with Big Bear Tyrant, he was suppressed by the opponent's meteor hammer and could not get close. He had many ways to break the situation, such as using guns, but it was too difficult to break the opponent's meteor hammer with a rapier. Julian got inspiration from Charlotte and secretly learned the rope dart method. He felt a little sorry and said, "You are going to duel with Ben Landlock, so you should practice spearmanship. Otherwise, I will accompany you to practice the spearmanship of the Ocello family for a few days." Charlotte only inherited the angel's thorn from the blood rose, and she learned the Ocello family's secret scroll from Julian, knowing that the Ocello family also has spearmanship. The Ocello family is a classical swordsman family, and they practice fighting spirit, which is more ancient than fighting spirit. The practice of fighting spirit, from the seed of power to fighting spirit, comes from the surging vitality of the night. The practice of fighting spirit is to condense the spiritual seed, which comes from the warrior's indomitable and unyielding fighting will. Therefore, the spearmanship of the Asilo family is also fundamentally different from the popular knight spearmanship in the Old World. It is called Wings of Heaven. This spearmanship is extremely fast at low levels, and more mental suppression at high levels. There have been many times when the Asilo saint who practiced the Wings of Heaven was shrouded in countless spiritual halos as soon as he appeared, making the enemy mistakenly think that he was a god descending to the earth and surrendering without a fight. Julian was called the youngest Sky in Baron. Half of the reason was because of his spearmanship. He wanted to make achievements on the battlefield, so he put 70% of his energy into the Wings of Heaven and invested less in the 12 movements of angels. That's why he was a mid-level extraordinary and only practiced the Wings of the Young Dragon, which was not as good as Charlotte. Charlotte knew that even if she tried harder, it would be impossible for her to achieve success in spearmanship in just a few days, so she gave up spearmanship at the beginning and wanted to try to use the meteor hammer to take shortcuts, but since Julian proposed it and was willing to accompany him to practice spearmanship, there was no reason to refuse. Charlotte borrowed a knight's lance from Julian. Julian had his own lance, but it was a bit excessive to use extraordinary weapons in such a sparring match, so he also chose an ordinary knight's lance. The two of them took their positions in the underground martial arts arena of the old Buddha's shop. Charlotte knew that her spear skills were ordinary. When she was in school, her spear and sword skills were not very good. And she had never practiced a sky wing spear of the Asilo family, so she took the initiative to attack. The sky wing is divided into 77 roots, which are also based on the starry battle spirit and are derived from the angel's thorn. Although Charlotte has not practiced much, this spear is still quite fast. Julian is a serious spear master. Seeing Charlotte's spear, he smiled slightly and pressed the knight's lance in his hand. Charlotte couldn't help but slide over and was knocked to the ground by Julian's knee. After Charlotte got up, she said in distress, "I know how to respond to this move. There is no problem using a rapier, but it is cumbersome to use a spear." Julian said, "Spearmanship and swordmanship are essentially the same, but there are many differences. The secret volume of the Sky Wing spearmanship of our Asilo family says, the key points of the offensive style are to leave nothing above the south, leave nothing above the north, leave nothing below the east, and leave nothing above the west, and to shoot straight in. The defensive style must be that the upper part is empty and the lower part is not empty, the inside is empty and the outside is not empty, twist up and not twist down, block the outside and not the inside, swing the light and not the weak, press down and not tilt, and shoot to the center." The spear you just shot was superficial, but it lost the true meaning of Asilo spearmanship. Charlotte felt dizzy and thought to herself, "Why does it sound like fruit tree cultivation to me?" Chapter 202 Duel witnessed by the royal family. Charlotte was not afraid of Julian. After all, they had fought before and he did not suffer any loss. But this time when he practiced spear skills with Julian, he realized belatedly that the spear skills of this youngest Kankyong and Baron were really terrible. Julian's spear skills were even better than those of Zeus. Charlotte could handle the same ordinary spear skills when Zeus used them, but he could not resist when Julian used them. In addition to the fact that he was not good at spear skills, it can also be seen that Julian's shots were more calm. Julian was just too young, only a freshman. If he reached the age of Zeus, his strength would definitely be stronger than Zeus. Under Julian's training, Charlotte's spear skills still improved very slowly. The cat's mask can only extract skills, not superpowers. Charlotte tried once without giving up, but only extracted wine tasting from Julian, which was worthless to him. Charlotte had been sparring with Julian for a few days, and just when he was familiar with the 77 wings of the sky, Aurora sent someone to deliver 3 things to him: a duel book, a knight's lance, and a rapier. Charlotte went to Julian's old Buddha's shop during the day, and came back at night to get these 3 things. Aurora had come during the day, but after asking Dorothy, she learned that Charlotte would be back very late, so she left someone to wait and went back. This was the 3rd official duel in Charlotte's life. The opponents of the first 2 duels were all high-level extraordinary people. Whether it was Harriet Alva or Zalman, they were all powerful and not on vain. When Charlotte received the 3rd duel book in her life and saw the duel opponent Ben Landmalloch, she suddenly felt a little emotional. She finally received a duel book of the same level. He and Ben Landmalloch were both mid-level extraordinary people. Although Ben Landmalloch's extraordinary level was higher, there was no desperate gap after all. The duel was 3 days later. The witnesses of the duel were Count Lanmerock, Count Sumery and His Majesty Emperor Alfred Guillaume. The general duel book was made in triplicate, one for each duel party, and the other was sent to the local patrol army office for safekeeping, but this duel book was made in quintuplets, two of which were sent to the Ingrimer royal family and the Fars royal family for safekeeping. The duel was instantly more impressive. The knight's lance sent by Aurora had the emblem of the Abulahum family on it. It was dark red with complex patterns, the lance head was sharp, the lance shaft was flexible, the shield was thick, and there was a balance cone at the tail. The overall shape was very similar to the knight's lance in ancient Europe on Earth, but there were extraordinary people in this world, and the countries in the old continent also developed complex knight lance techniques, so the knight's lance also became solid, which was not comparable to the disposable knight's lance on Earth. In the duels and battlefields of the old continent, there would not be such a scene as the sound of the lance breaking resounding through the sky. This is an extraordinary knight's lance. Charlotte actually has another extraordinary knight's lance. He dueled with Zalman, the general of the Yugoslav Restoration Army, under the fort of Mostar, killed his opponent and stole his lance. But Charlotte was not good with lances. So he sent the knight's lance to Machupi and never brought it with him. This knight's lance is called Collapse Mountain, which has 5 properties: armor penetration, shock, magic breaking, blood loss, and absorbing vitality to repair the lance body. Even in Baron, it is a good knight's lance. Maybe it was too short a time, Aurora did not find a blood-sucking rapier, but the rapier sent was of quite good quality, not inferior to the unicorn. The duel book that Charlotte received also specified the duel location, but it was not designated by Ban Lanmerock, but by Alfred Guillaume, the Emperor of Ingrimer. The duel location of the two was on the Saventus River that passed through Breton. If a superhuman runs at full speed, he can tread water for a short time, but if he stops, he will sink unless he has special abilities. His Majesty the Emperor designated the Severnich River as the duel venue, which was like forcing the two to keep running, making the duel more lively and allowing more people to watch. The Severnich River must be long enough to accommodate countless spectators on both sides. Charlotte has the light and spider skills, so he is not afraid of dueling on the river, but he also knows that as one of the witnesses of the duel, Count Lanmerock has no objection. Ben Lanmerock must have corresponding abilities, which can give him a certain advantage in a duel venue like the river. Charlotte just signed the duel book and asked Aurora's people to take it back. A group of people wearing the uniforms of Fars envoys rushed into the embassy. Seeing Charlotte holding the duel book, someone asked, "Where is Grand Priest Oxfredin? Is Mechlin here?" Charlotte saw that this group of envoys came at night so hurriedly, and she was a little curious, and said, "The Grand Priest is not here. He is talking with officials from Ingrima on a foreign affairs mission. I am Charlotte Mechlin. What can I do for you, gentlemen?" A man in gorgeous clothes stood out from the crowd. When he saw Charlotte, he said with a little arrogance, "Are you the Mechlin who signed the covenant?" Charlotte nodded slightly and replied, "It's me." The man said, "You don't need to know my name. I'm here only to bring the will of my king. Grand Priest Oxfredin was sent to Ingrima and made outstanding achievements. You signed the covenant and made great contributions to the empire, so I specially commend you. Here are the commendation documents for both of you. I'm so tired from traveling all the way. These 2 documents are for you. You will pass on the one for Grand Priest Oxfredin. I will go home and rest first." The man handed over the 2 documents and left. His attitude was extremely arrogant, but he did not embarrass Charlotte. In order to complete his mission, he had to travel a long way to the Ingrima Empire. He did not want to cause trouble and talk nonsense with Charlotte. Charlotte took the 2 documents and watched the man, who must be a noble, leave the embassy. Suddenly, Emperor Alfred Guillaume gave her a position and political identity, and also gave her a house. I was somewhat satisfied. The nobles of various countries in the old world often have some intricate connections, even relatives, close blood ties, and positions in different countries. It is the style of these nobles to be able to get along with everyone in diplomacy and to be able to make a fuss. The concept of loyalty to country has not yet emerged in the old world. For the nobles, the first thing to be loyal to is themselves, followed by their families, and then their territories. The country is just the ruler above them, not the object of unconditional loyalty. Most nobles in the old world were far less loyal to their country than commoners. Charlotte put away the 2 documents and went back to her room to sleep. He had to rest up for the next few days and wait for the duel. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, It means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 203. 3 days later. The nobleman who sent the document came in a hurry, left 2 documents, and never appeared again. The Grand Priest Augsrebin also never appeared in the next 3 days. Charlotte went out early and came back late in the past 3 days, and went to the old man's shop to practice various martial arts. On the day of the duel, he brought Dorothy, Anastasia, Belissa, 18 overback Red Bear warriors, and a bunch of entourage to the banks of the 7th River. Thanks to the publicity of the Anglima noble circle in recent days, the entire banks of the 7th River were densely packed with people. This duel attracted countless people to watch. Charlotte learned in the first 2 days that most of the nobles in Breton had placed bets on his duel with Benlan Marlock, so he simply took out 2,000 gold and entrusted Julian to bet on him. If he won, everyone would be happy. If he lost, the money was robbed anyway, so he would just treat it as going back to where it should go. The Severnite River is the largest river on the island of Breton. It flows through more than 10 cities and finally flows into the sea in Breton. There are more than 200 bridges on this river, and there are 60 or 70 bridges in Breton alone. The most famous one is the Breton Bridge. This bridge, named after the city, connects the 2 sides of the Severnite River. One end is in the Dragon District, leading directly to the Red Dragon Palace, and the other end is in Mount Galvin, where the Gillam family spends the summer in the Palace of the Spring. The Breton Bridge is divided into 2 floors. The lower floor is open to ordinary Breton residents, and the upper floor is a peculiar bridge-style palace. Most of the time, ordinary residents are allowed to pass through, but on important holidays or special days, it will become an important occasion. At this time, it will be closed and ordinary people are not allowed to set foot. Just like now, members of the Gillam royal family, including the emperor himself, and a group of senior officials, are in the palace on the upper floor of the Breton Bridge, ready to watch this excitement. When Charlotte reached the shore, he was about to leave immediately, but he was stopped by someone. He was also told about the duel process. There were 3 duels of a performance nature before him, and then the main show between him and Ben Lanrock, and finally a grand performance. The veins on Charlotte's forehead were tense, but in the end he said nothing and waited patiently for his moment. He did not find Ben Lanrock, but guessed that he was with his father on the Breton Bridge. The arrangement of the duel witnessed by the royal family was very considerate. A platform on the shore was arranged for Charlotte and others, and there were chairs prearranged on the platform. They even provided food, champagne, and beer, so that he could wait for the duel with peace of mind. Charlotte picked up a glass of beer and took a sip. Then he heard a long whistle, and a saint level soared into the air. He could not help but exclaimed. This duel was really grand, and there was even a saint level. The saint announced the names of the first pair of performers in Glimmer in the Sky, and introduced their origins. Then the 2 young knights jumped onto the small boat prepared for them, and started a duel on the river. Charlotte thought that everyone had the ability to tread water, but she didn't expect there was such a mode. The duel between the 2 young knights ended with one of them being knocked into the Severnage River. The victorious party gracefully stretched out his knight's lance and pulled the loser onto his boat. The saint who presided over the duel announced the second pair of duelists. These 2 duelists were much stronger. They jumped into the Severnage River from both sides of the shore, and their fighting spirit was urged, and their bodies were full of water vapor. The territory of Inglimmer is the 3 islands of Inglimmer, which is considered a maritime country, so there are many knights who practice marine fighting spirit. James Cook and Francis Drake, 2 captains of the Navy, also have marine fighting spirit. Charlotte watched the 2 men running wildly on the Severnage River, the knights' spears strangling like dragons, and she really saw some interest in it. It was much more interesting than the first duel, and the level was far higher than the previous one. This duel lasted for more than an hour before one side was defeated. The losing knight swam back to the shore, like a drowned chicken, and walked away dejectedly without talking to anyone. The winner ran wildly on the river and was invited by the emperor to go to the Breton Bridge to watch the duel below. When it came to the third duel, Charlotte couldn't help but cheer up, because the saint who presided over the duel in the sky announced that this duel was a life and death fight. The challenging party, because his fiancée was defiled by the other party, the challenged party did not dare to fight, and asked his younger brother to come out. Seeing the 2 young men pick up the boat at the same time, Charlotte knew that the duelists in this duel might be average in martial arts, but the degree of tragedy would definitely exceed the previous two. 10 minutes later, Charlotte was looking at the two young men who died together, both of whom were pierced through the abdomen by the knight's spear, and he felt quite depressed. He didn't quite understand what the point of such a duel was. The real culprit was not hurt at all, and the two people who died in the duel were innocent. When the saint in the sky announced his name, Charlotte grabbed the knight's spear and collapsed a mountain. When he hesitated slightly and was about to change a weapon, he heard a long whistle like a torn cloth from the opposite side, and a figure jumped into the air from far away. A clear voice resounded over the Severte River, "Charlotte Mecklen. If you are willing to stay away from Miss Sume and admit defeat, I am willing to postpone this duel." Charlotte said nothing, and activated the light agility and spirit spider techniques to jump up. He asked himself if he had made such a loud voice that could be heard on both sides of the Severte River. This side has special abilities, and skills alone cannot do it. He simply did not speak, but opposed with actions. Both of them were fast. The knight's spears of both sides clashed for the first time on the Severte River, making a strange whistle. Charlotte's Sky Wing Spear technique, which had been improving these days, was fully utilized at this moment. She fought fast with speed and did not lose the upper hands in the first encounter. After a stab, the two sides passed each other and changed positions. Charlotte used the light agility and spirit spider techniques to stand on the water like a god, with the knight's spear pointing straight. And the momentum continued to rise. Ben Landmark also stood on the Severte River. Unlike Charlotte, he had a round table-sized piece of floating ice under his feet. The youngest lion in Breton stood on the floating ice, as steady as a mountain. His knight's lance was also pointed at Charlotte. He was slightly surprised and shouted, "Despicable farce, you actually stole Aurora's heart while I was not in Breton. I will never allow you to leave the Severte River cleanly." Charlotte was about to ask, which cleanly. Ben Landmark had already stepped on the river and launched the second assault. Every time he stepped on the river, a piece of floating ice would grow. This was the secret frost dragon fighting spirit of the Landmark family, which was extremely cold and heroic. Chapter 204, Duel on the Seventh River. Charlotte was not to be outdone. With a light shake, he subtly changed the position of his feet, making it impossible for Ben Landmark's attack to lock onto him. The second time the two fought, it was another fierce collision. Charlotte's performance was still good, but not as good as the first attack. His hands were not strong enough to relieve the force, causing one foot to step into the river. However, he immediately slapped the surface of the Sevence River with his knight's lance, and with the help of the recoil of the river, he flew into the air and forced back Ben Landmark, who was about to pursue him. The two sides ran wildly on the river for 3 circles, and launched an attack again without any prior agreement. The two knights' lances were like dragons out of the sea and like dragons stirring the tide. In the blink of an eye, 6 or 7 rounds passed. Charlotte's hands were already slightly unsteady. He knew that he could only go this far with his spear skills. If he went any further, he would most likely fail. He took a deep breath and shouted, "Earl Landmark's spear skills are the best in the old continent, so I also changed to knight's lance to show my respect. I've seen the spear skills of the Landmark family. Please allow me to change to a more suitable weapon." The crowds on both sides burst into loud cheers. Charlotte's words greatly satisfied the vanity of the Ingrimer people and even won the love of some Breton residents. Even Emperor Alfred Guillaume, who was watching the battle on the Red Bridge, grinned and said, "Allow Charlotte Mecklen to change to a more suitable weapon." Soon, the Emperor's order was passed on to the two duelists by the Holy Order presiding over the duel. Ben Landmark lowered his knight's lance and shouted, "Change your weapon." Charlotte threw the collapsed mountain with her backhand. The knight's lance crossed a vast Severnich river and stuck on the river bank. Julian smiled and pulled out the knight's lance. With both hands, he threw the rope dart that Charlotte had played with a few days ago into the air above the river. Charlotte was very surprised. He originally thought that Dorothy would throw his spare meteor hammer. Dorothy, who was holding a pair of meteor hammers, was also stunned for a moment and said to Anastasia and Belissa, "This weapon is so weird." Charlotte took the rope dart, and Ben Landmark attacked again. Charlotte had no choice but to use all the rope dart tricks. Even the Emperor Alfred Guillaume, who was watching the battle, praised her. Ben Landmark had never seen such a weapon before. He felt that Charlotte's every strike was very powerful. The rope dart had many wonderful uses, allowing many parts of the body to launch two short knives with the help of the swinging rope. He had to deal with it carefully. The two sides fought for 17 or 18 moves. Ben Landmark finally figured out the mystery of the rope dart. If it was an extraordinary weapon, he would have a slight headache, but it was just an ordinary weapon. It couldn't penetrate his protected frost dragon fighting spirit. Although the rope was longer than the knight's lance, it was not a threat. Ben Landmark regrouped and changed his tactics. Every strike of the knight's lance in his hand brought a 3-point rotation force. As long as he was entangled by his lance, Charlotte's rope dart would inevitably be entangled. Seeing that the situation was not good, Charlotte threw out the rope dart and shouted, "Ben Landmark, I think you should show some real skills and stop playing games." He waved his hand, and Dorothy deducted a magic card. A mysterious force sent a pair of meteor hammers to the surface of the river. Charlotte reached out and grabbed the meteor hammer, changed her moves, and used a set of orc meteor hammer techniques, which were fierce and uncast, and the hammer technique was exquisite. Ben Landmark fought with Charlotte for more than 20 moves, and then he understood his foundation. With a shake of his hands, the frost dragon fighting spirit spread from the gun barrel, and when it touched Charlotte's meteor hammers, the domineering icy fighting spirit froze the meteor hammers. Although Charlotte's pair of meteor hammers were fine products, they were just ordinary weapons and could not withstand the fierce fighting spirit of the Landmark family. Charlotte dropped the chain in her hand and waved her hand again. Anastasia threw his two magic rapiers at him. When the two magic rapiers fell out of her hands, she remembered that she was used to using two swords, but Charlotte usually only used one magic sword. She couldn't help but secretly exclaimed, "Oh no, I was so fascinated by it that I forgot which one I should give him." Charlotte didn't actually remind him of this. She thought that during the duel, Dorothy threw him the meteor hammer and Anastasia threw him the rapier. Either one would be fine. But she didn't expect that this female knight who was used to using two swords would throw both rapiers at him. He turned his hand and took both magic rapiers in his hands. These two extraordinary weapons were exquisite. It would be a pity to drop them into the seventh river. Seeing the expression on Ben Landmark's face, Charlotte smiled and said, "Change weapons again." Ben Landmark didn't waste any words. He urged the knight's spear, like a frost dragon turning the river and the sea, and used the family knight's spear skills to make the waves surging and the atmosphere like a mountain. Charlotte finally changed his usual weapon. With the experience of the previous dozens of moves, he was finally not so panicked. He relied on the light agility technique and the spirit spider technique to swim all over the river, and the two swords were either staggered or split, showing the swordsmanship of the Oscillo family to the fullest. Charlotte was able to practice the 12 movements of the angel to the 8th movement, Duskology. In terms of pure swordsmanship, Zeus and Jillian were not as good as him. Although his star fighting spirit was slightly weaker, he had opened up 7 bloody whirlpools, 6 of which could be amplified, which made up for most of the gap. Charlotte was not an orthodox warrior, and had never felt the difference in changing weapons before. But under the huge pressure of Ben Landmark, one of the strongest knights of the younger generation, he finally found that the magic rapier was more convenient. No matter how long or short the weapons were, they were not as powerful as the bonus of the 12 movements of the angel. The two sides fought fiercely on the Severnage River for 200 or 300 moves. All the nobles and residents of Britain who watched the battle felt that the trip was worthwhile. They were fascinated and people kept cheering them on. Aurora was watching the duel on the Breton Bridge beside her father. She watched him change weapons several times in a row. And each weapon was used skillfully. Ben Landmark was not at a disadvantage in the fight, and finally changed to a two-handed rapier, and his swordsmanship was even more elegant and romantic. She couldn't help but feel a little jealous, thinking to herself, is Menelman really the most beautiful woman in the old world? Before there was Zimmerman, and now there is Charlotte Mecklen, and there is no telling how many admirers are willing to fight for her. We are both girls, why is she so outstanding? What Aurora didn't know was that Ben Landmark challenged Charlotte Mecklen for her, and the duel was so grand that almost everyone knew that His Majesty the Emperor was a witness. On this day, at least half of the girls in Britain envied and jealous Aurora Sumai, and wanted to say to her, we are both girls, why are you so outstanding? Chapter 205, Ode to the Dark Knight. Charlotte's biggest advantage is the spiritual enhancement brought by facing the evil god twice. Therefore, during the period when he crossed over, his progress in practicing bloody glory was very fast, and he only fell back to the level of ordinary genius not long ago. Despite this, the enhanced spirituality still gives Charlotte a special advantage in some aspects. For example, he can distract himself to manipulate multiple targets. When he used the Hand of Flame, he didn't feel it yet and just thought it was a normal phenomenon. But now he held two swords, attacked separately, and changed each other, like an arm to use his fingers, and everything went as he wished. Only then did he understand. After hundreds of moves, Ben Landlock gradually gained the upper hand. After all, his cultivation was more solid than Charlotte's, and the time he had been infected with a gun technique was much longer than Charlotte's. In terms of combat experience, the two were equally matched. Charlotte and Zeus had hundreds of duels in the Dreamland, as well as several battles on the battlefield, which made up for the shortcomings in the time of cultivation. Overall, Ben Landlock's real strength was stronger. Charlotte's two swords were flying, and he gradually felt that he was at a loss. Just when everyone thought that the situation would not change, he suddenly changed his left and right swords, and each used a different style of swordsmanship. Although they were both the 12 movements of angels, the sword in his left hand was like the rising sun, the morning light, and the sea, while the sword in his right hand was like dusk, the dark night, and the haziness. It was like two swordsmen with similar skills fighting together, which immediately equalized a disadvantage and brought the battle back to mutual attack and defense. Outsiders did not know the mystery, but Julian, who had also practiced the 12 movements of angels, had his eyes lit up and thought to himself, it turns out that the swordsmanship of the Asilo family can be used in this way. Julian knew that Charlotte's swordsmanship was better than his own, and he also knew the 12 movements of angels. The first 6 movements were completely different from the last 6 movements. The first 6 movements were from dawn to sunset, and the last 6 movements started from dusk. In other words, the last 6 movements were the essence of the Asilo family's swordsmanship. Of course, Charlotte couldn't use the angel's 12 movements to double its power, so he used one-hand swordplay as the main skill, and used the other hand swordplay as an auxiliary skill, using only the first 6 movements. It seemed that the two swords had similar power, but in fact they were very different. It was just that people who were not proficient in Asilo's swordplay could not see the clues at all. Especially the first 6 movements of the angel's 12 movements, which were open and aboveboard, and magnificent, and really didn't show any weakness at all. The fierce fight was so intense that Charlotte's swordplay with both hands changed. The left-hand sword was like dusk, dark night, and haziness, while the right-hand sword was like the morning sun, the dawn, and the sea, and he immediately gained the upper hand. Ben Landmark was known as the youngest lion in Britain. Although he was several years younger than Charlotte, he had practiced various extraordinary methods since childhood. And his foundation was much stronger than Charlotte's. Although he could not withstand Charlotte's dazzling swordsmanship, he was able to hold on steadily, blocking Charlotte 5 steps away with a knight's lance. Charlotte made 3 consecutive sword strikes, and her heart moved slightly. She found that Ben Landmark's knight's lance was just right to block the sword every time, and she knew that the two-handed sword technique she was playing had been seen through by the opponent. He did not continue to change his moves, and then threw a rapier, shot it on the shore, and nailed it in front of Anastasia. Only 1 rapier was left, but his momentum suddenly soared. Julian only took a glance and couldn't help but blurt out, 9th movement, Ode to the Night. This is a world of extraordinary people, so even in the Asilo clan, very few people specialize in swordsmanship and spearmanship, and most of their energy is invested in various supernatural powers. For example, someone can cultivate the colorless blade, and the star battle spirit is stronger than the opponent. Even if the swordsmanship is slightly inferior, with a sword light that can be stretched and retracted at will, it can still gain the upper hand. Julian only cultivated the angel thorn to the young dragon wing. It's not that he can't go to the next level, but only the young dragon wing is pure swordsmanship. The rest of the colorless blade, the fierce erosion, and the dark erosion are the foundation and the star battle spirit. He mainly studied spearmanship, and he didn't need to invest so much in swordsmanship. Although Julian thought to himself that if he went all out, he might be able to cultivate the 12 movements of the angel to this level when he reached Charlotte's age, he was still surprised by the swordsmanship talent of this good friend. At this time, the Severnish River was frozen by Ben Landmark's frost dragon fighting spirit because of the fight between the two. Countless round-table-sized floating ice floated on the river, creating a spectacular sight. When Charlotte broke through before the battle and played the 9th movement, Night Ode, the entire river seemed to be shrouded in a layer of night. Charlotte's body movements were like a civet cat in the night, elegant and light, but with hidden murderous intent, and could burst out a fatal blow at any time. The fight between the two people was sublimated again after Charlotte gave up a rapier. Emperor Alfred Guillaume was very satisfied. He looked around and asked, "Ben Landmark is the youngest line in our Breton. What title is appropriate for Charlotte Mecklen?" Count Sume said lightly, "Charlotte is no longer young." His Majesty the Emperor said a little, and began to focus on watching the duel again. Aurora couldn't help but roll her eyes. She knew what her father meant. If Charlotte was too favored by the Emperor, it would trigger a series of consequences, such as, her competitive pressure would be greater. Aurora is actually not young anymore. Even though she was born into an aristocratic family and had a good father, it took her 5 or 6 years to become a 19th-class peer and a cultural commissioner in the residence of a diplomat and minister. It was only a few years after graduating from college that she was able to achieve such a position, which shows how outstanding Aurora is. But for a girl, this is already the age when roses begin to wither. In the first few years, Earl Sume was quite picky about his son-in-law. In the earlier years, there were many harsh conditions. But now, the Earl has reached the point where even a Fars person is fine. Julian was born in the Three Emperors clan, and the tutor of the Asilo family made him study step by step, so he is now a freshman. Ben Landlock's father was a famous warrior in the Old World. He was promoted to the saint rank when he was very young. He was very radical in educating his son, and everything was benchmarked against Zimmermann Axel Robin. So this young man entered college at the age of 12 and graduated in just 1.5 years. The reason why Aurora couldn't accept Ben Landlock was not only because he was too straight, but also because of the age difference. Ben Landlock was too young for her. The horned vulture in Charlotte's hand suddenly screamed loudly and clearly. He showed a heartfelt smile for the first time since the war began, and shouted, "Mr. Ben Landmark, warm-up is over." Chapter 206 The Ankle of the Goddess of Victory. Ben Landmark was in a state of panic. When Charlotte came out with a knight's lance, he thought it was an orthodox duel. Then Charlotte changed to a fancy rope dart, and he thought it was Fars's special weapon. When Charlotte changed to a meteor hammer, he really thought that this was Charlotte's real hidden skill. Until Charlotte changed to a double sword, he was no longer sure how many skills Charlotte had. When Charlotte gave up a rapier and only had a horned eagle, Ben Landmark was 100% sure that this guy was proficient in more weapons than just these, and there must be a backup. At this time, Charlotte shouted, "The warm-up is over." Ben Landmark breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that it was true, and shouted, "Come on, let's fight to our heart's content." Charlotte swung her sword and drew 17 circles in a row, and the colorless blade condensed into 17 circles of light in the air, pushing with his sword. Ben Landmark had never seen such a wonderful swordsmanship before. He was ready to fight, but just as he activated his Frost Dragon fighting spirit, his feet sank, breaking through the ice and stepping into the water. He hurriedly activated his Frost Dragon fighting spirit, but failed to stabilize his body in time, revealing a big flaw. Charlotte smiled slightly, increased the light agility to the highest level, and the unicorn directly sent it, breaking Ben Landmark's spear style, pointing at his chest, and said lightly, "You lose." Ben Landmark didn't expect that he would lose so easily. He was a tough person and was unwilling to argue that it was the broken ice under his feet that made his body unstable. He whispered, "You win." He turned the knight's lance in his hand and handed the handle to Charlotte, then let go and turned away. Charlotte reached out and grabbed the knight's lance, glanced under the river, and the 7 flaming hands returned one by one and merged into his body from under his feet. He had come up with this move to deal with Hughes, but he didn't expect to use it on the youngest lion in Britain. At the beginning of the battle, Charlotte thought of this move when she found that Ben Landmark relied on the Frost Dragon's fighting spirit to condense the ice layer and move freely on the river surface. However, she went to great lengths to avoid leaving any traces. Ben Landmark's step on the air and broke the ice layer just now was calculated by him. He used the hand of flame to melt the ice under the ice layer, leaving only a thin layer. If Charlotte had used this move at the beginning of the battle between the two, it would have been useless, because both sides' fighting spirits were at their peak. If Ben Landmark stepped casually, the river water would freeze and he would not be affected at all. But the two sides had fought for hundreds of moves, fighting for exactly half a morning, the whole noon, and part of the afternoon. The fighting spirits were no longer at their peak. In order to save fighting spirit, Ben Landmark did not let the fighting spirit leak out and freeze the river water. It was just such a small detail that allowed Charlotte to catch the ankle of the goddess of victory. Charlotte raised his rapier and lance high. There were constant cheers from both sides. I don't know how many girls from Breton threw him victory kisses. Charlotte circled the Severnage River twice before returning to the shore. The first thing he said to Dorothy was, "Hurry up and get me a set of dry clothes and shoes. I'm soaked all over." It's really uncomfortable. Although Charlotte could run on the waves with his agility and spider skills, he didn't avoid water. By now, he and Ben Landmark were soaked all over. Charlotte didn't know how Ben Landmark felt, but he definitely wanted to change his clothes. Dorothy looked at Charlotte, who was soaking wet, and said with a playful tone, "You have a nice figure." Charlotte replied, "Don't talk nonsense." Dorothy hummed and said, "Then don't talk nonsense. How could you think that I would prepare these for a man?" Charlotte was speechless. There were 3 ladies in his team. Dorothy was also a lady from Sumay's family. Although her father was not a count and her status was not as noble as Mandelmann's, she was also a top-notch noble lady and would not do this. Although Anastasia was an illegitimate daughter, she was the daughter of Baron Phyla. She was also pampered and had never done any hard labor. She was also a daughter of heaven who had attended university. Although Belissa's status was lower, she followed a duchess since she was very young. She was called a maid, but she had never done any heavy work. She just directed other servants to do the work. At this moment, Julian came over and handed over a set of clothes. Charlotte breathed a sigh of relief, got on the dark luxury, closed the door of the carriage, drew the curtain, took off her wet clothes, wiped her body with a towel, and changed into comfortable and dry new clothes. She immediately breathed a sigh of relief. As soon as he got off the carriage, he heard a team of soldiers wearing royal knight armor coming over and shouted loudly, "Mr. Charlotte Mecklen, His Majesty invites you." Charlotte hurriedly put away the dark luxury and followed the royal knights to the Breton Bridge. Meeting the Emperor of Ingrimer, one of the 5 major empires of the old continent, twice in a few days is an extremely rare honor. Even many of Ingrimer's nobles may not meet the Emperor so frequently. In Fars, Charlotte didn't even meet Emperor Julius Axel. Not to mention the Emperor, she hadn't even seen the gate of the palace. At most, she met the Emperor's brother-in-law, Baron Faberius, who loved to give away all his wealth. Emperor Alfred Guillaume seemed very happy to see Charlotte. He had a seat prepared for him next to him and said, "In fact, the performance after each duel is the best part. This time the performer is the royal dance troupe. It is said that the principal dancer is a princess from the New World with a great figure. It is said that she has a husband." Charlotte couldn't understand why His Majesty seemed more excited when he mentioned the principal dancer's husband, but she still complimented, "Your Majesty's dance troupe must be the best in the entire continent." Emperor Alfred Guillaume sighed and said, "It's a pity. They all said that as an emperor, I should not indulge in fun and they don't allow me to go. Only on occasions like this can you witness the charm of the dance troupe." Charlotte glanced at the Ingrimer officials and nobles around her and decided not to participate in this topic. Soon, more than 10 flower boats sailed over the Severnage River. The largest one crossed and rushed to the Breton Bridge. The other flower boats released hooks and pulled the flower boat to prevent it from drifting downstream. Dozens of beautiful dancers appeared one after another, singing and dancing, but this kind of classical dance was really not as sexy as the young ladies on the short video websites. Charlotte watched for a while and lost interest. She only regretted that she was beside the Emperor and it was impossible for her to slip away halfway. Chapter 207, Killer Whale and Lion Meru. Charlotte was drowsy watching the show. This period of time was more tiring than his duel with his follower Landmark. Emperor Alfred Guillaume was very excited to watch it, and even rewarded the dancers with some gold pounds on the spot. Unfortunately, a bunch of ministers tried to dissuade him, otherwise he would have wanted the dancers to perform 2 more times. After finally getting through it, Charlotte was about to say goodbye when she heard Emperor Alfred Guillaume say, "Sir Mecklen, do you have a similar troupe of dancers in Fars?" Charlotte thought to herself, "Even if there is, I don't know about it. This kind of dance troupe, which no one can afford except the royal family, I have seen in Anglima, but how can I have the opportunity to meet them in Fars?" He was about to answer, but suddenly felt countless eyes on him. The ministers of Anglima were all eyeing Charlotte, which made him feel particularly stressed. Charlotte could only laugh and said, "I am only a small district patrol commander in Fars, not enough to witness such a luxurious scene." This answer satisfied the important officials of Ingrima, and Charlotte felt that the pressure on her was reduced. Emperor Alfred Guillaume said with some regret, "Yes, your status is not enough. Unfortunately, I can only grant you the position in Ingrima, and there is no way to promote your position in Fars, Sir Mechlin. You have to work harder." Charlotte didn't dare to answer. Was this encouraging him to inquire about the situation in Fars and report to Emperor Ingrima? Isn't this a high-level spy? If this job is done well, he will be hanged, and the crime is no less serious than summoning the evil god. Doing the splits. I guess people would be split too. Emperor Alfred Guillaume said to the officials around him with satisfaction, "Okay, stop staring at Lord Mechlin. I'll go back to the Red Dragon Palace to handle those government affairs." He patted Charlotte's shoulder and said, "I'll summon you again in a few days." Charlotte felt as if a prehistoric beast was pressing on her shoulders. It was not a mental pressure, but a physical pressure. She was horrified and thought to herself, His Majesty Alfred Guillaume is at least a saint. The emperor left with a group of ministers. Charlotte waited for a long time before she was about to leave, but Aurora called her back. "Mr. Mechlin, you've worked really hard today." Charlotte took a deep breath and activated Bloody Glory to dispel the pressure left on her body by Emperor Alfred Guillaume. She forced a smile and said, "I also got a generous reward, didn't I?" Aurora said, "I'll treat you to a meal as a thank you." Charlotte readily agreed and said, "No problem." The two got off the Breton Bridge. Aurora did not take a carriage, but took Charlotte to a restaurant on the banks of the Severnage River. The restaurant was very elegantly decorated and extended to the side of the river. Guests at that seat could enjoy the beautiful view of the Severnage River while dining. Aurora ordered a few authentic English horse dishes. Charlotte originally thought that even though English horse cuisine was famous for being unpalatable, it would not be that unpalatable in such a high-end restaurant. But when the first dish came, he knew he was wrong. This dish was a pot of sticky vegetable puree with a circle of fried fish heads. Not to mention the appearance, the smell alone was very uncomfortable. Each fish head stared with its eyes wide open, as if telling the guests that they died a miserable death and could not rest in peace on the table. The second dish was quite normal, a huge pork elbow, but the cooking method was a bit strange. Charlotte poked it with a knife and was sure it was raw. Aurora introduced, "This is our famous dish in Inglima, salted pork knuckle. No seasoning other than salt is used, and it is not cooked. Salt is applied on it and waited for air drying. Then it is stored in a cave to develop a unique flavor. It often takes several years to make one." At Aurora's instigation, Charlotte cut off a small piece and took a bite. She felt that her tongue was numb from the saltiness. As the next few dishes were served, Charlotte tasted them one by one under Aurora's introduction. She felt that there was nothing more painful in the world than this, even more unbearable than watching classical dance next to the emperor. He knew that Inglima's food was unpalatable, but he didn't expect it to be so unpalatable. The ingredients used in each dish were top-notch, but the cooking methods of each dish were incredible, and the creativity was beyond belief. It was almost impossible for a normal person to make it taste so unpalatable. Aurora casually talked about duels. Charlotte was trying his best to deal with these unpalatable hard dishes and didn't dare to be distracted. Seeing that he had no interest in duels, Aurora changed the subject and said, "What do you think of your Majesty's dance troupe?" Charlotte reluctantly swallowed a mouthful of salted pork knuckles and said, "I always feel that it's strange that there is a dance troupe but no assassination. Under normal circumstances, should a princess who hates the destruction of her country appear as a female assassin?" Aurora couldn't help laughing and said, "How could there be assassins? Do you know how many saints are around your Majesty? I'm afraid there are more saints than Fars invested in Fellenden. If an assassin appears, I'm afraid not only the assassins, but also the organizations from which the assassins came and the financiers who hired the assassins, many people will be uprooted." Charlotte was surprised and said, "Is there more than one saint present today?" He really hadn't seen what the emperor looked like when he was traveling. But when he thought of this young emperor, he could understand that it should be normal for him to have a stronger protective force around him. However, Charlotte could not help but secretly complain, "This emperor is so powerful that few people in the old world can match him. What kind of protection does he need?" At this time, the Fars embassy was already very lively. Charlotte did not come back, but Dorothy, Anastasia, and Belissa had all returned. They also brought back Charlotte's trophies, Ben Landmarok's knight's lance. Because she was going to see the emperor, Charlotte could not bring any weapons with her. His horned vulture, Blood Rose, and the magic rapier sent by Aurora, as well as the withered rose and the knight's lance collapse mountain, were all brought back by Dorothy and others. The people in the embassy were passing around Ben Lanmarok's knight's lance. This knight's lance was very famous in Britain and was called the Whale Killer. It was said that when Count Lanmarok was young, he used this knight's lance to kill a giant whale, hence the name. Later, when Earl Lanmarok's cultivation level improved, he changed to a more prestigious knight's lance, and the Whale Killer was passed to his son Ben Lanmarok. Ben Lanmarok relied on this knight's lance to defeat hundreds of enemies in duels, so this lance was also nicknamed Lion Pill, which was also a symbol of the youngest lion in Britain. Chapter 208 A Royal Widow Princess. After eating, Charlotte separated from Aurora and even declined her suggestion to go shopping. He felt uncomfortable without a weapon. Usually, he at least had a blood rose. Before he had a blood rose, he would carry a blood-sucking hand axe and a magnum hand shuttle. Aurora said nothing and asked Charlotte to send her back to the foreign minister's residence. After Charlotte sent her back, he hurried back to the embassy street. When he found Dorothy, took back the blood rose and the withered rose, and put them into the bloody vortex in his left arm, he breathed a sigh of relief. The sense of security returned. He thought to himself, it's a pity that the anti-space long-range rifle and the 2 silver rhinos are in Machupi, otherwise the sense of security would be stronger. Charlotte took back 2 knight lances and 2 rapiers. It was already late at night, so he went back to his room and practiced Bloody Glory for a while. Just as he was about to go to bed on time, he remembered the 2 documents. In order not to affect the mood of the duel, the Grand Priest Oxrudin did not come back, so Charlotte did not touch the 2 documents. He did not open the document of the Grand Priest Oxrudin, but took out his own document, opened the wax seal, and pulled out the official document. This is a standard royal document. In addition to commending him for his contribution to the alliance between the 2 countries, there is only one sentence that is considered dry goods, promoting Charlotte Mecklen to the 3rd level General Affairs Chief of the 27th grade. Although Charlotte was promoted to the 1st level, she still did not become a 24th grade or above, commonly known as an insurmountable class, and was not as high as her position in the Anglima Empire. But Charlotte also knew that the situation in Anglima was a very special situation. After all, not everyone has the opportunity to be received by the Emperor and be appreciated. He was very happy to receive this important document. The next day, the High Priest Oxrudin showed up at the embassy, which was very rare. No one knew where he had been in the past few days. The High Priest looked tired and his legs were weak, as if he had done a lot of physical work. Charlotte hurriedly handed the document to the High Priest. Grand Priest Augustin took out the document, looked at it for a while, and said lightly, "Mr. Charlotte Mecklen, your wonderful life in Anglima is over, you are about to return to Strasbourg and will have a new appointment." He generously handed the document to Charlotte. Charlotte took a look and found that there was indeed a message urging her to return home. It was not just Grand Priest Augustin's nonsense. He was full of confusion and asked, "Why do I have to go back?" Grand Priest Augustin said with a smile on his face, "I don't understand why only you go back. But this is a good thing. I also miss Strasbourg, but for the Emperor and for Fars, I will continue to stay in Anglima." Charlotte saw that the High Priest was very happy, and she really couldn't tell that he missed Anglima at all. He did miss Strasbourg, and mainly he missed Anne. Although he had a little social circle in Breton, Julian was from Bronx and would have to go back to Bronx sooner or later. Aurora's personal charm was obviously not comparable to Anne's. Dorothy, Anastasia, and Belissa would all go back with him, not to mention. Charlotte chatted with the High Priest for a while, then wrote a document and submitted an application to the foreign minister's residence to return to the country. As a diplomat, his every move must be in accordance with the rules to avoid causing unpleasantness between the 2 countries. Soon Charlotte received the official document from the foreign minister's residence. In addition to wishing him a safe journey, he also designated a warship for him, so that he could go back to Fars on the warship called Anglima. This was a very rare honor. In the afternoon, the palace sent someone over again to invite him to the palace. Charlotte got on the royal carriage amid the envy of the diplomats. This time, he did not carry any weapons, so after passing through many checkpoints and being touched by the eunuchs, he met Emperor Alfred Guillaume again. His Majesty the Red Dragon Emperor was very happy to see Charlotte and invited him to a royal dinner. The main dishes were exactly the same as the one Aurora had invited him to yesterday, but they were more exquisite, especially the pan of sticky vegetable puree with a circle of fried fish heads. It looked bigger and more miserable than the one Aurora had invited him to. At the dinner table, Emperor Alfred Guillaume said proudly, "I have also sent an envoy to go to Strasbourg with you. The ambassador extraordinaire is my aunt, a widowed princess of the royal family. I specially selected her for you. You must seize the opportunity." Charlotte couldn't help swallowing a mouthful of fish head. He really didn't understand the emperor's thinking. What aunt, widow, princess? Every word was a serious word, but every time it came out of the emperor's mouth, it was deeply blasphemous. Emperor Alfred Guillaume saw Charlotte's dull face and thought he was very happy. He said excitedly, "In addition to the big meal, I also prepared appetizers for you. The commissioner who followed my aunt is Miss Aurora Sumer. How is it? Am I good to you? You have to work harder." Lord Charlotte Mecklen. Charlotte nodded frequently, but he really didn't know whether he should add this oil. What serious consequences will there be after refueling? Emperor Alfred Guillaume chattered and told Charlotte about his aunt's various preferences in detail. Charlotte knew that the eldest princess, whom she had never met, liked to wear silk underwear from the New World during a dinner. She even knew the eldest princess's taste in food, the novels she liked to read, the poems she loved, and so on. Generally speaking, only a close maid or a housekeeper can know such details. Charlotte was sitting on pins and needles during this meal. He didn't expect that he could receive such a unique task from Emperor Alfred Guillaume. Although the emperor didn't say anything, the hint was very obvious, and he almost wrote "I want to have fun" on his face. Under such heavy pressure, Charlotte even felt that Anglima's special dishes were not so unpalatable. After dinner, Charlotte was escorted out of the two palaces with the emperor holding her shoulders. Every time she passed through a corridor, countless eyes were fixed on Charlotte's buttocks, as if she was a sycophant who was seducing a foreign emperor. Charlotte was like being held in the arms of a real red dragon. She was trembling all the way, fearing that the red dragon emperor would turn against her and eat her alive. Only after leaving the palace did he let out a long sigh, feeling as if he had escaped from some devil's cave. Chapter 209, Black-robed female saint rank. Charlotte was very sure that Emperor Alfred Guillaume was definitely not a young man without any scheming and unable to hide things. Her first impression of the Red Dragon Emperor was 100% wrong. His Majesty might be young, but he was definitely a man of unfathomable depth and strategy. His every move was meaningful, and he was definitely not a shallow person who liked to show off his power. Ordinary people could not detect that a saint could definitely restrain his power. Emperor Alfred Guillaume revealed his strength twice, once on the bread bridge, patting him on the shoulder, and once just now, sending him out of the palace, hugging his shoulder. This move must have a deep meaning. Charlotte sat in the carriage, looking back at the Red Dragon Palace, and inexplicably felt a sense of fear, just like the feeling he had when he faced the two evil gods for the second time. Charlotte sighed from the bottom of his heart, and stopped thinking about it. He waited for the carriage of the palace to take him back to the embassy street. He did not enter the embassy of Fars, but turned around and left, changing to dark luxury. He wanted to take a look at the mansion given by the emperor before leaving. This mansion is at 698 South Riverside Street in Severntès. There is a street running through Breton on both sides of the Severntès River. The side close to the Red Dragon Palace is the South Riverside Street of Severntès, and the side close to the Yauquin Palace is the North Riverside Street of Severntès. The South Riverside Street of Severntès is much more prosperous, with many famous buildings of the Anglima Empire, many scenic spots, many high-end shops, restaurants, taverns, cafes, and even Fars' almost tea house, which specializes in providing tea from various countries for guests to taste and buy. Number 698 South Riverside Street of Severntès is not far from the Embassy Street. Dark Luxury was pulled by 8 magic horses and arrived in just over 10 minutes. Charlotte turned the Dark Luxury into a ring and couldn't help but look up. This house was even weirder than he had imagined. It was indeed weird, not luxurious. It was on a lonely hill. Although the hill was not that high, it was still about 70 or 80 meters, so the carriage could not go up. A piece of open space was specially enclosed at the bottom of the hill for parking the carriage. However, the parking lot for the carriage was empty now, and it was obvious that no one lived in this house. Charlotte had already obtained the documents and keys of the property. He looked at the gate of the house. The gate was built very grandly, but there was nothing behind the gate. He could see 2 steps inside. All the way down, there were only a few steps, leading to the parking lot for the carriage, and all the way up, climbing the mountain. Charlotte was too lazy to open the door. She activated the light agility technique and jumped over the gate. She climbed up the steps and walked 70 or 80 steps to a small platform. There were 2 more steps here. One led to a house halfway up the mountain, which was number 699, and the other led to the top of the mountain, which was number 698. Charlotte was slightly interested in this neighbor. He guessed that there was probably no one living here now, so he walked up the steps leading to the middle of the mountain to take a look at what the house looked like. He had just walked 20 or 30 meters when he heard a faint voice coming from above his head. "This is a private residence. Trespassers, please stop." Charlotte didn't expect that this neighbor was still there. He felt embarrassed and hurriedly took out the residential documents and said, "Sorry, I have residential documents." As soon as he said this, his hand shook slightly, and the residential documents disappeared. This was a big shock. Charlotte drew the rapier at his waist and took a defensive posture. Someone could actually take the documents from him without leaving any trace. This person was really scary. After a while, a graceful figure in a black robe appeared in the air and said, "You're in the wrong place. Number 698 is on the top of the mountain." The graceful figure in a black robe dropped the residential documents and disappeared from Charlotte's sight in an instant. Charlotte jumped up and grabbed the residential document that floated down, and broke out in a cold sweat. Holy steps, how could there be a holy steps? He regretted that he was too reckless, and was secretly surprised. Why would there be such a neighbor? There were no carriages in the parking lot at the foot of the mountain. He had always thought that no one lived here, and looking at the steps he walked along the way, there were almost no footprints, which meant that the person living here was only the female holy step in black robes. She didn't even have a servant. Of course, it is also possible that the other party had a servant of the holy steps. This possibility is too low. Why is there a holy step living here? What does it mean that Emperor Alfred Guillaume gave me such a house and I have a weird holy step as a neighbor? Am I being tricked? Charlotte changed the road while thinking wildly, and he soon reached the top of the mountain. The top of the hill is flat, and it is a small square of more than 10 acres in size, according to the area unit on Earth. On one side of it, a Sherlock-style building is built. It is also very tall. Although there are not many floors, only 5, each floor is probably more than 6 meters high. On Earth, it is a high-rise building. Charlotte took out a key and pushed the door open. The first floor is similar to number 58 Élysée Pastoral Street. There are 3 study rooms, 2 reception rooms, a hall, and 2 dining rooms. There is thick dust everywhere. I don't know how long no one has lived here. Charlotte glanced at the room and decided not to explore it further. Anyway, he was going back to Fars. He would consider cleaning next time he came. Charlotte closed the door again. When he went down the mountain, he looked at the mountainside and thought of the mysterious female saint again. Although according to the customs of the earth, he should visit the neighbors, but Charlotte felt that this was definitely not a good idea. The mysterious female saint looked bad-tempered. If she was killed and thrown into the 7th river, even the Emperor of Fars would not seek justice. Charlotte took a deep breath, walked to the foot of the mountain, released the dark luxury, and returned to the embassy in Fars. He didn't have much time left in Britain. In the next few days, he bought a few gifts and prepared to go back to Strasbourg to give them to people. He also said goodbye to Julian. Julian didn't say anything, but just wished him a safe journey. Charlotte knew that if she had to go to the battlefield again, she would definitely have another chance to meet Julian on the battlefield. At that time, the two would not be friends, but enemies. But this matter that has risen to the national level, there is no more words to say, and he can only say goodbye to Julian attentively. This time, he will not bring Julian into the diplomatic corps again. A few days later, Charlotte received the news that the warship Titan Whale was leaving to take him to Fars, so he packed his luggage, took Dorothy, Anastasia, Belissa, and 18 Red Bear warriors, and set off for the port. He did not expect to see another acquaintance at the port. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 210, Widowhood or Something has nothing to do with this matter. James Cook was the captain of the Titanic. Charlotte had a friendship with Francis Drake, the captain of the White Sea Dragon, and Captain James Cook in Cappadocia. She also defeated a fleet of slave traders with the help of their warships. The two sides had a friendship of gold pounds. By the way, Charlotte entrusted Julian to bet her 2,000 gold pounds, because he defeated Ban Lamrock, which had quadrupled to more than 8,000 gold pounds. With some of the money he had in his hands, he now had more than 9,000 gold pounds, which made him a rich man even in Anglima. Seeing James Cook, Charlotte hugged him warmly. James Cook was also very happy to see Charlotte. He had a very pleasant time in Cappadocia last time. When he returned to Breton, he learned that Charlotte not only delivered the heads of Chatham and his important subordinates as promised, but also described herself and Francis Drake as heroes who rescued foreign envoys, recovered Cappadocia, and defeated the pirate fleet in the documents. He also heard that His Majesty Alfred Guillaume liked Charlotte very much and had summoned Charlotte several times in a row. He also gave Charlotte a position and political status in the Ingrimer Empire, and felt that he needed to make more friends with this young man. Charlotte arrived at the port earlier, and he was invited by James Cook to board the Titanic, and a VIP room second only to the captain's room was arranged. At noon, Aurora also led a team and boarded the Titanic. When she saw Charlotte and James Cook chatting and laughing, she couldn't believe her eyes. James Cook is 35 years old this year. He is a 5th-level warrant officer of the 20th grade of the Empire. He is a high-level extraordinary person with a surging ocean-related fighting spirit. He became a Navy captain by relying on his real talent and is in charge of the Magic Alchemy warship. He has an extraordinary status. He is usually arrogant and always looks down on the trash who rely on aristocratic birth to seek a high position. Even if he meets a fellow 19th-level participant like her, whose political identity is the cultural commissioner of the diplomatic minister's mansion, he is unwilling to say anything and at most handles the matter in a business-like manner. But this extremely proud Navy captain is chatting with a foreign diplomatic commissioner like a brother at this time. Aurora sighed and remembered some of the words her father said in the past 2 days, asking her to seize the opportunity. Aurora was originally quite disgusted with these old-fashioned words, but now she was slightly moved. Charlotte was naturally friendly when she saw Aurora. After all, they were friends, and their friendship was more important than gold pounds. Charlotte fought for Aurora and got 2 magic rapiers, 2 knight lances, and the horned eagle because of fighting for Aurora, and they were all fine products. This friendship was even deeper than that with James Cook. Although James Cook felt that Aurora was only relying on her father's protection and was actually higher than his position, he was very dissatisfied. But on the one hand, the other party was a lady, and on the other hand, Charlotte was the middleman, so he smiled and greeted her, showing his alienation. Aurora didn't need to please James Cook, and the three of them gathered together, chatting while waiting for the arrival of the eldest princess. As a result, the three of them waited until the afternoon, but still couldn't wait for the eldest princess. James Cook didn't dare to urge him, and complained a few words. Charlotte didn't dare to respond, but just smiled and became a quiet listener. James Cook was just talking about the eldest princess's strange temper. After her husband died, she shut herself up and was not suitable to be a diplomatic ambassador at all. The sky darkened slightly, and a figure in a black robe appeared above the Magic Alchemy warship. Charlotte almost cried out in surprise, because she had just seen this neighbor not long ago. She was still wearing the same style of black robe, the same graceful figure, the same austere and mysterious temperament. The eldest princess in black robe looked exactly the same as the one Charlotte saw that day, except that she had a book in her hand. But he never thought that this mysterious neighbor of the Holy Order was the eldest princess. James Cook was talking excitedly, and he saw Charlotte's dull expression, looking up at the sky, and the whole person was a little dumbfounded. A faint voice came from above, "Arrange a quiet cabin for me." James Cook hurriedly led the way and arranged a cabin for the eldest princess, which was also next to the captain's room and opposite Charlotte. Charlotte and Aurora watched the eldest princess enter the cabin in order not to disturb her. They both held back their smiles, greeted James Cook, and returned to their cabins. James Cook had to command the Magic Alchemy warship to set sail, so he couldn't accompany the two. He returned to the captain's room, sweating coldly, and kept wondering if the princess had heard his nonsense. Charlotte returned to her room and practiced Bloody Glory as usual. After he practiced all the bloody whirlpools, he was thinking about how to pass the time. After all, in this era, taking a boat was still a bit boring. He heard someone knocking on the door. He thought it was Aurora, so he opened the door, but it turned out to be a graceful figure in a black robe. The eldest princess was called Guillaume. Her black robe even covered her face, revealing only a pair of lifeless eyes. Charlotte performed an imperial salute and was about to speak when she heard Princess May say, "Do you have any books here?" "I only brought one, which I've already finished reading." Charlotte was slightly surprised and asked, "Books? What type?" Princess May said in a light tone, "Novels." Charlotte had also read several novels from the Old World after traveling through time. She thought to herself, the novels from the Old World are crudely written and the stories are old-fashioned. They are not as good as those newcomers who can't even get contracts and are asking for reviews on Yahoo. What is there to read? Although he didn't say it, the disdainful expression on his face revealed his inner thoughts. Princess May's lifeless eyes were slightly angry, and she said, "Just because of you, you look down on those novelists. Do you know how many joys and sorrows, love and hate, magnificent and ups and downs they have created? Do you know how deeply they analyze the human heart, respect morality, love the world, and sympathize with the world?" She stretched out her palm and pushed. The slender palm just made a gesture, and Charlotte felt like being crushed by a mountain. He couldn't even draw out the rapier, and could only madly operate bloody glory. He struggled and said, "I still like to read classic literature." He was a time traveler, and he never thought that because he didn't like to read the vulgar novels of the Old World, he offended a saint, and a saint princess of a very high status. Widowhood and so on have nothing to do with this matter. Chapter 211. Charlotte's hoarse voice resounded throughout the room. Princess Guillaume raised her voice a little and said, "Have you read some classic novels? Then please describe which authors' books you have read." She casually mentioned a few authors, and Charlotte was dumbfounded. He naturally knew nothing about them. What was the point of reading novels in this era? Princess Guillaume sneered and said, "I knew you were just talking nonsense. You don't understand literature at all, let alone read any classics. Today, I will teach you a lesson on behalf of all writers." Charlotte was really going crazy. His mind was spinning rapidly. He tried his best to activate his insight and take a look at the book in Princess May's room. It was a night novel, a genre that had long been lost on Earth. In the end, only an anti-night novel Don Quixote was placed on the altar of world classics. Charlotte had never read Western night novels, but she only flipped through this night novel from the Old World with her insight. I guess no matter how bad the night novels on Earth were, they would not be as bad as this. He searched through all the online novels he had read in his life, and even though the backgrounds were too different from those of the Old World, he could not find many fantasy classics. He cursed those online writers for not writing more fantasy novels, and at the same time, he picked out the few online fantasy classics, discarded those that were written by straight men, and found a fantasy novel that was slightly more female-oriented, and shouted, "Once upon a time, there was a kingdom of Grey Castle, and there was a fourth Prince Roland." Princess May was actually very angry. It was very abnormal for Charlotte to become her neighbor, and it was even more abnormal for her to be named by the Emperor's nephew to go on a diplomatic mission to Fars. After boarding the Titan whale, she met Charlotte again, and she had already seen through the Emperor's nephew's dirty thoughts. When Charlotte was reciting the book, she didn't feel anything. When she heard that the fourth Prince Roland saved the witch Anna who was about to be executed, her eyes suddenly lit up. The story was so exciting that she had never seen it in her life. She pushed out her palm, retracted the force by 70% or 80%, pushed Charlotte into the room, stepped into it herself, and closed the door behind her. The whole room was filled with only Charlotte's hoarse voice. Well, she was reciting a novel. Charlotte recited for half an hour, and only memorized about 5 or 6 chapters, but she was almost dehydrated, more tired than the follower Landmark who dueled for several hours. Princess May was sitting cross-legged on the bed, listening to him patiently telling the story. Charlotte finally felt that the threat of life and death had gradually dissipated. He poured herself a glass of water and drank it in big gulps. Then he coughed lightly, changed his voice to a less hoarse and more leisurely tone, and continued to recite the novel to the eldest princess. Princess May listened for a while, grabbed a pillow, leaned lazily on it, and became more and more fascinated by what she heard. Suddenly there was a knock on the door, and Aurora's voice rang out, "James Cook invites us to the captain's room for dinner." Charlotte was about to agree and got up to open the door, but Princess May suddenly floated up, covered her mouth, stretched out her slender fingers to draw in the air. And the pink fighting spirit gathered into a line of English words, Don't tell them that I was here, Charlotte thought to herself. We made such a big noise just now, they must have known about it a long time ago. Why should we cover our ears and steal the bell? The eldest princess drew another line of words. I used fighting spirit to seal the sound. Charlotte was quite surprised, and thought to herself, is there such a technology? The eldest princess loosened her hand, and with a flash of black robe, she disappeared in the room. Charlotte didn't even see how she left. He got up to open the door and saw that Aurora had changed into a long dress, which made her look like a noble lady, completely different from her usual hunting suit, which was neat and tidy. He smiled and said, I was just practicing. Aurora was a little surprised and said, why do you have to explain this to me? I won't check your room. Charlotte looked back guiltily, which made Aurora couldn't help but look around as well. Charlotte saw that the room was empty and put her mind at ease. However, Aurora couldn't help but change color and asked, why is your room better than mine? Charlotte was confused. She didn't expect Aurora to care about this issue. James Cook reserved the 2 best VIP rooms on the ship for Charlotte and the eldest Princess Guillaume, so naturally he could only arrange a slightly inferior room for Aurora. Aurora said angrily, I will go to James Cook to ask clearly. I am a fellow practitioner of the 19th rank. Charlotte spread her hands and thought, it's a good thing that they didn't find a widowed eldest princess in my room. As for the room, after all, it's a small matter. He believed that James Cook could handle it. In case of a chance, it would just be a matter of exchanging rooms with Aurora, and he could accept it. Who made him lower than Aurora in rank? He glanced at the princess room, and Aurora said, Her Royal Highness doesn't want us to disturb her, and she won't dine with us. The 2 arrived at the captain's room. Aurora, who was originally angry, became gentle and polite, and did not mention the room. She was like a qualified noble lady, elegant and generous, full of admirable atmosphere. James Cook was quite talkative. He was not familiar with Charlotte last time, so he was more cautious and prudent than Francis Drake. But now he knew that Charlotte was a good person with unlimited potential and was favored by His Majesty Alfred Guillaume, so he changed his attitude. At the dinner table, only James Cook and Charlotte talked, and Aurora didn't say a word. Charlotte was quite interested in this magic alchemy warship and asked some questions about it. James Cook was willing to explain most of them, but a few of them said that this was a military secret and could not be explained in detail. The guests and hosts had a great meal. After the meal, James Cook invited the 2 to have a cup of coffee, and then he said goodbye because he had to operate the warship. Charlotte wanted to go on the deck for a walk. Just as she was about to ask Aurora if she wanted to go with her, she heard a faint voice in her ear, It's time for dinner, come to my room quickly. Charlotte had no choice but to say goodbye to Aurora and said she would go back to practice. Aurora said nothing and left. Charlotte returned to her room, stood at the door, looked across, and was wondering if he should really go over there. When Princess May's door opened and he was sucked in by a force. When the door closed, Charlotte saw Princess May sitting on the bed with a pillow in her arms. There was also brewed black tea beside her, and it was obvious that she had prepared it. He could only continue to recite the novel to the eldest princess, but in the later plot, this novel involved some chemical knowledge. There was no chemistry in the damn old continent, so he had to force himself to make up stories. When night fell, Charlotte was finally able to get away temporarily. He returned to the room, breathed a long sigh of relief, and couldn't help muttering to himself, thanks to the author. If I can go back to Earth, I will at least treat her to a meal to express my gratitude. Actually, she can treat me too. Chapter 212 The Devil's Law. Oh. There are so many kinds of magic? It's incredible. Can magic be used like this? The 4th prince is really a genius. Is this the writer from your farce? I want to visit this great writer. Charlotte was sweating and said hurriedly, No, you don't want to. This author, he went out to travel, well, very far away. It is said that he is seriously ill and needs to find a very strange herb to treat it. Princess May held her cheek, pondered for a while, and suddenly said, Don't tell this book anymore. I think your storytelling skills are too poor. This good novel is ruined. I will buy the original book when I arrive in Fars. Before that, you must not spoil the story. Although Princess May's face was covered by a black robe, Charlotte believed that under the black robe, the eldest princess must have a look of contempt. Charlotte just breathed a sigh of relief, and heard Princess May say, Change to a slightly worse story. Slightly worse story. Charlotte suddenly had a terrible guess that if she returned to Earth one day, She would definitely not be able to find other authors to eat. He thought for a long time and finally chose a fantasy book that girls might like. He said, "Once upon a time, there was a count who had a son named Douay. Douay never wet the bed. He couldn't speak until he was 3 years old. Everyone thought he was dumb or even an idiot. On the day he was 3 years old, it rained and thunder and lightning flashed. He suddenly said his first words, 'Damn.' When Charlotte told this story, a 1.89-meter tall, fat man wearing a pair of expensive glasses always appeared in her mind, roaring angrily, 'Whose book are you saying is slightly worse?' Princess May soon became fascinated by the story. She found that this book had a dramatic plot, vivid characters, humorous language style, and a touch of style. Except for the story she just heard Charlotte tell, all the novels she had read in her life were garbage compared to this one. It was unimaginable that there were such good stories in the world. She suddenly understood why Charlotte looked so contemptuous when she heard that she liked novels. The eldest princess secretly said in her heart, "Are the novels of Ingrima so different from those of Fars? No, I have also bought many novels by Fars writers, and they are not as good as these, is it? Only in Fars can you read authentic Fars novels? The best novels in their country are not published by Ingrima. What kind of weird rule is this?" Princess May still felt that Charlotte was tongue-tied and could not express herself well when telling stories. She didn't know that it was Charlotte who was trying hard to change the original story to fit the style of the old world and remove the plots about time travelers. Inevitably, the story was a little fragmented and then collapsed. She listened reluctantly for a whole day. When she let Charlotte go at night, she said, "This story is too good. Your telling is still too bad. I will also go to Fars to buy the original version of this story. Please change another story for me tomorrow." Charlotte was speechless. He was about to leave when Princess May said, "I have to visit this author when I go to Fars." Charlotte said hurriedly, "He is the author of the previous book." Princess May said coldly, "The conception, creativity, writing techniques and writing styles of these two books are completely different. Are you kidding me?" Charlotte did not expect that the eldest princess had a high level of literary attainments. Of course, she knew that the two books were not written by the same author. She was about to make up a reason why a certain author was also out of town when she heard Princess May say, "Aren't you going to say that he is away on a long journey again? Is every author in Fars away on a long journey? Do you think I am a fool?" Charlotte replied hurriedly, No, the author's wife is very jealous and does not allow him to have any contact with any female readers. Every time he receives a letter from a female reader, he will be punished by not eating dinner. Every time a female reader visits her, she will beat him up. This is really inconvenient." Charlotte wiped the sweat off her face and told him that she was glad that she had traveled through time and space, and that the novelist would not come to the old world to beat him up. Princess May was half believing and half doubting, and waved her hand to let him leave. The next morning, Charlotte got up with a dizzy head, and was thinking hard about which fantasy novel would suit the taste of the widowed princess of the old world. A certain ancient classic would not do. The book had 4 protagonists, and one of the protagonists had sex with her teacher, who was also a princess. And there were many indecent descriptions of the princess in the book. He also had no ability to forcibly transform the characters in the book. If he read it out verbatim, Princess May would definitely misunderstand it, and might suddenly have the intention to kill him. Just as he was washing up, he heard the alarm on the ship, and he was immediately relieved. He hurried to the deck and saw 2 magic alchemy warships coming in the distance, riding the wind and waves, with a flag of Byron hanging on the warships. James Cook also went on the deck, looked far away, his face was livid, and he said, "Turn around, we only have 1 warship, and we can't resist 2 Byron warships." Charlotte couldn't help but say, "Can we ask Princess May to help?" James Cook shook his head, pointed to the sky and said, "The other side also has Saint rank." Charlotte looked up and looked far away. His cultivation was slightly worse than James Cook. Insight is all-round observation, not far-sightedness. Therefore, after a while, he saw 2 figures floating in the sky. Obviously, Byron also sent out Saint rank. James Cook's decision was right. Only relying on speed to get rid of the 2 magic alchemy warships was the best choice. 2 warships combined are definitely stronger than 1 warship, but 2 warships combined may not be faster than 1 warship. Under the command of James Cook, the Titan whale quickly completed a beautiful turn, but under the pressure of the 2 Byron magic alchemy warships, it could not return to Ingrima and could only be forced to go west. The technology of the 3 magic alchemy warships is almost the same generation, and the sailing speed is almost the same. The giant god whale cannot get rid of the 2 warships behind, and the 2 warships behind cannot get close for a while. The 2 blood clan saints of Baron did not seem to catch up and fight with Princess May. After sailing for several days, the 2 sides gradually deviated from the continental route and began to enter the depths of the sea. At present, people in this world have only explored the old and new continents, but have explored the oceans in depth. A total of 7 seas have been identified, and the most explored one is the Giant Whale Sea. As the magic alchemy warship sailed into the deep sea, Charlotte could occasionally see deep-sea giant whales surfacing and spraying water into the sky. This ocean is the home of giant whales, and sailors often encounter various ocean giant whales, hence the name. Chapter 213. This is the real royal sister flying. This kind of boring pursuit at sea is a great test of the commander's level. As an elite naval force of Ingrimer, James Cook's command ability is unquestionable, but the 2 magic alchemy warships behind him appear and disappear from time to time, always chasing closely, which makes James Cook very stressed. He is not here to fight, but to escort the envoys to Fars. James Cook knows very well that sending the envoys to Fars is his main task, and a decisive battle with the navy of the Byrons is not the strategic goal of his trip. He looked out to the sea and said to Charlotte beside him, "If the Titan god whale sails north, it will be able to go around the other end of Galling Island. I remember that you have a fleet in Cappadocia City. I will drop you off at Galling Island. You can cross Galling Island and set sail from Cappadocia City to Fars." Charlotte was surprised and said, "Doesn't that mean you have to lead away 2 of Bayron's magic alchemy warships? If Princess May is not on the warship, Bayron's holy order will stop your ship." Charlotte was not sure about the rest of the words. There were many taboos on the warship, and many things were not appropriate to say. James Cook said in a deep voice, "This is my duty. The first duty of a soldier is to complete the mission." Charlotte shook her head and said, "I have a better way, James, you might as well listen to it. If it doesn't work, we will do it according to your way." James Cook was stubborn. If it was someone else, he would definitely not even listen and directly reject it, but Charlotte was extraordinary to him. He patiently said, "You say it." In fact, he didn't believe that Charlotte could make any suggestions. After all, Charlotte was a civilian and had no military system at all. Although Charlotte captured Cappadocia and built a fleet from scratch, James Cook admired her a little, but he didn't think it was a military talent. It was just good luck. After all, he forced Chatham's fleet to surrender. He didn't know that Charlotte himself was more capable. His fleet in Cappadocia was purely for maze-like and forcibly pieced together. Before leaving, Charlotte left the fleet to seamen and crews. One is the owner of the merchant ship, and the other is the former chief patrolman of the Cappadocia City Patrol. The former is not reliable at all, and only under the threat of salted fish balls did he reluctantly obey the command. The latter is a Galling, who was first deceived and mistakenly thought that Charlotte was a Byron, and later, James Cook and Francis Drake arrived in Cappadocia City, and naturally they could not hide anything. It was lucky that no one exposed Charlotte's identity on the spot. Charlotte did not believe that she would see a fleet when she returned to Cappadocia. As for using the maze to go back to Fars, it was not in Charlotte's plan. The fewer people who know this secret, the better. After all, this secret directly points to the fact that Charlotte Mecklen had summoned the evil god. Charlotte coughed lightly and said, "In fact, the navy of Ingrima is definitely better than the navy of Byron. I also firmly believe that James Cook's command and combat capabilities are far superior to those of the naval officers of Byron." This flattery made James Cook very comfortable. He showed a listening attitude and waited for Charlotte's advice. Charlotte said, "So, I have a plan. Let me find a way to lure away a magic alchemy warship, so that you can fight against another magic alchemy warship one-on-one." James Cook also agreed with his strategy, but he still patiently explained, "This is almost impossible." Charlotte smiled slightly and said, "The Byron people cannot only wait on the way that the giant god whale must pass, but also send 2 saints to put pressure on Princess May. They know us very well." James Cook nodded. The giant god whale was intercepted by 2 Byron magic alchemy warships at sea. Someone must have leaked the information. Charlotte then said something that surprised James Cook, "If Princess May takes you away, will they send warships to chase them?" James Cook flatly rejected it. "I will never leave the warship." Charlotte smiled and said, "No one can let you leave the warship. If you leave the warship, This plan cannot be carried out. I can't command this big thing. Charlotte took out the cat mask, handed it to James Cook, and said, "We let Miss Aurora Sume disguise herself as you, and let the eldest princess take her to take a circle around the 2 Byron warships. Even if they have any doubts, they will send a warship to chase them. Moreover, they will definitely send at least one saint. Without a saint, the eldest princess cannot be stopped." James Cook's mind suddenly became clear. Although this plan was very rough, if Princess May really took him, the captain, to escape, the Byron people would go after them even if they knew there might be a trap. If they don't chase, it's not a big problem. Princess May can just go around and come back. James Cook pondered for a long time and said, "I'll go and tell Princess May about this plan." Charlotte thought to herself, "That's great. I can hardly find a novel to recite these days. Every time I recite a few dozen chapters, Princess May says, 'This is a great story.' My words are boring and my expression is dull. It affects the excitement of the story. She asks me to shut up. She wants to buy the original book to read. She asked me to change the story. Even if you want to squeeze juice, this is not the way to squeeze it. This is a dry pond." James Cook went away for dozens of minutes, came back in a hurry, and said, "Princess May agreed to this plan, but rejected Miss Aurora and appointed you to play me." Charlotte's forehead buzzed at that time. This is a bit difficult to bear. However, this plan was proposed by him, so he could not refuse such a thing. He tried to persuade Princess May in person, but the answer he got was, no discussion. Charlotte could only look depressed and entrusted 2 knight lances and a magic rapier to Dorothy. He only brought a horned vulture, 2 ordinary pistols and a bag of bullets. As for the blood rose and withered rose hidden in the bloody vortex of his left arm, they were his safety guarantee. After finishing the aftermath, he changed into James Cook's uniform, stroked James Cook for a while, and changed into the appearance of this Ingrimer naval officer. Princess May's arms passed through Charlotte's armpits, gently lifted him up, urged his fighting spirit, and circled around the 2 magic alchemy warships of Byron. Although Charlotte tried to fly into the air with the floating world flowers, it felt different when flying in Princess May's arms. He muttered in his heart, "This is the real royal sister flying. She is not only a royal sister, but also a royal sister." Chapter 214, Distant Anger. Well, although it is reasonable to say that no matter what you are controlling, the person should be on top. Charlotte felt Princess May's aura and suddenly felt that it would be okay for her to be at the bottom. The posture is not important. The commanders of the 2 Byron magic alchemy warships were not quite sure what the Inglimmer people were doing. They did recognize James Cook. After all, young officers of this level, who were both high-level extraordinary and captains of magic alchemy warships, might not be able to gather 20 people in the 5 major empires combined. This kind of basic intelligence is not lacking in the 5 major empires. When Princess May circled near the 2 Byron Empire magic alchemy warships, one of the warships fired a cannonball. Princess May lightly circled and avoided the alchemy cannonball that was not accurate enough because of the long distance. The alchemical shells fired by the extraordinary magic alchemical cannon exploded in the air. Even though it was still quite far away, Charlotte was still frightened and whispered, "Princess May, we can retreat," the eldest princess said lightly. "How can we not fight back?" Before Charlotte could say anything, she felt a whirring wind in her ears. Princess May dived and threw him towards a magic alchemical warship. Without Charlotte as a burden, the eldest princess's fighting spirit surged, turning into a pink meteor and crashing into an extraordinary magic alchemical cannon. 2 Blood Clan saints of Baron hurriedly took off and stopped the eldest princess. Each extraordinary magic alchemical cannon is extremely expensive. The extraordinary materials and craftsmanship required for its construction are not comparable to the extraordinary weapons used by individuals. If Princess May destroyed one of them, the loss would be heavy. Charlotte didn't expect that she would be thrown onto the enemy's warship. He hastily drew out the horned eagle, and with a flash of sword light, he killed 2 Baron Navy soldiers who rushed up. "I still offended Her Royal Highness the Grand Princess. In fact, it's not bad to tell Her Royal Highness a story on the warship. What's wrong with being a little bit more exploitative? There are so many online novels. Even if you memorize the beginning of one every day, you can't finish them in 1 or 2 years. If it doesn't work, there are world classics. Why should I complain? Why don't you know how to appreciate your blessings?" Charlotte was madly complaining about himself while fighting madly. He really fought for his life. After all, The Navy soldiers of a whole magic alchemy warship were rushing up to besiege him. Charlotte was worried about being black-shot and was afraid of being besieged. He didn't dare to stay at all. He used the light agility and spirit spider skills to run around the warship. He used Asilo's swordsmanship to make it fly and flow, colorful and beautiful. Even when he rushed into the battle alone under the Silver Pigeon Castle and killed Jonathan, Charlotte had never been so excited. After all, under the city of Silver Pigeon Castle, there are wilderness all around, and he can escape anywhere, but now he is trapped on a magic alchemy warship, and the space is very limited. There are high-level extraordinary people on this magic alchemy warship, and there are even 7 or 8 mid-level and low-level extraordinary people. The danger and excitement of this battle is the only one Charlotte has seen since she crossed over. Charlotte's horned vulture attacked, and a Baron officer also raised his sword to fight back. The two sides exchanged a move, and Charlotte failed to kill his opponent. He immediately performed the light agility technique and jumped to the next deck. He was alone. Once surrounded by the Baron people, he would be beaten to death in a dozen moves at most, and he dared not entangle with any enemy. On this Baron magic alchemy warship, almost all the naval officers and soldiers went crazy. They didn't expect to be attacked by a human jumping ship. At this time, Charlotte used the cat mask and changed into the appearance of James Cook. Although she did not use the ocean-type fighting spirit shown in the data, and her swordsmanship was not the Ingrima style, such a fierce fighting power could only be achieved by the captain level. For a while, even if some people were confused, no one thought about it carefully, and just wanted to surround and kill Charlotte first. James Cook looked from a distance and was also shocked when Princess May threw Charlotte down. He was worried about Charlotte, but saw another Baron magic alchemy ship accelerating and rushing towards the Titan whale. James Cook understood in an instant that it was the captain of this Baron warship who thought he was not on the ship, so he attacked forcefully. The operation of the magic alchemy warship is very complicated. With or without the captain, the combat power is completely different. The opponent wants to take advantage of James Cook's absence on the ship to defeat this Ingrima magic alchemy warship. James Cook hesitated for a moment before making up his mind. He abandoned his worries about Charlotte and Princess May and ordered his Titan to slow down and choose a battlefield where he could fight the Baron warship. Charlotte fought bloody battles and didn't know how many people she had killed. She was wounded in at least 6 or 7 places, but she couldn't escape at this time. She could only fight bravely. He didn't even have the spare time to hate the eldest princess. The sword of the Horned Eagle swept from left to right, and was blocked by a Baron officer. He hurriedly used the light agility technique to avoid this enemy with strong swordsmanship, but he was so exhausted that he couldn't raise his blood. He was entangled by the dense swordsmanship of this officer. Charlotte was horrified and wanted to break through the obstruction of the Baron officer. The sword of the Horned Eagle slashed continuously, killing 6 or 7 ordinary naval soldiers who rushed over, but he also had another wound on his body. Just when Charlotte thought he was going to be in trouble, a slender hand fell from the sky, lifted him up, and rushed into the sky. Princess May urged her fighting spirit to fly, and slashed the fighting spirit light behind her. 2 Blood Clan saints from Baron followed her relentlessly. The magic alchemy warship that Charlotte had fought with also followed. Although the saints can fly, they cannot fly all the time. There is always a time to land, rest on the ground, and restore energy, so the warship must follow behind. In the eyes of the Baron people, their saints can return to the warship to rest at any time, but the eldest princess cannot. Sooner or later, she will drag down the Saint Princess of Ingrima. Charlotte was panting heavily. In the previous battle, his bloody glory was consumed extremely, and he was almost exhausted. Suddenly, he heard Princess May say lightly, "Are you a fan of Menelman?" Charlotte was slightly surprised. "I don't know why the eldest princess mentioned this." He agreed casually, "Senior Menelman is my idol." Princess May chuckled and asked, "Do you know how I became a widowed princess?" Charlotte had no idea, but before he could answer, she heard Princess May say, "My husband was killed in a one-on-one duel by Menelman's fiancée, the famous Zimmerman Axelrobin. Now you know why I threw you down." Chapter 215 Alfred Guillaume, that bastard. He was the most outstanding young officer in the Ingrima Royal Navy. No one in the Royal Navy could match him so far. It was just an ordinary battle to encircle and suppress pirates. No one expected to meet Zimmerman Axelrobin. By the way, his last name was not Axel at that time, but Zimmerman Robin, originally. My husband's navy had the upper hand, but he was angered by the humiliation of Zimmermann Axel Robin. He was arrogant by nature and never thought that he would lose to anyone in swordsmanship, so he agreed to a fair duel between the two, Zimmermann Axel Robin. He was killed in that duel, the Ingram Royal Navy was defeated, and he became the deputy of the Pirate King. No one can describe the despair I felt when I heard the news. If it weren't for the novel to support me, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to endure so many years. Charlotte was very angry at first, but after listening to Princess May's detailed account of all this, she felt a little sympathetic, and her anger was reduced from 10 points to 9 points. She said loudly, "What does that have to do with me? I'm not Mormon Axel Robin." Princess May said softly, "It was that bastard Alfred Guillaume who asked you to approach me, right? Even if there is no old grudge, what's wrong with me giving a little punishment to the little bad guy with evil intentions?" Charlotte was speechless. He wanted to say, "This has nothing to do with me," but how can such a thing be explained clearly? Emperor Alfred Guillaume had put him in the trap since he awarded him the house at 698 South Riverside Street in Cervantes. He had to take the blame whether he wanted to or not. Princess May smiled softly and said, "Didn't I save you in the end? You should be glad that you can recite a few novels." Otherwise, the eldest princess didn't say what would happen next, because the two blood clan saints of Byron were already chasing them. Charlotte looked far away from the sky and saw that the giant god whale had already started fighting with a magic alchemy warship of Baron. Although another Baron warship could not catch up with the flying saint order, it was still following behind. He took a deep breath, suppressed his emotions, and said, "Find an island and throw me down. In the battle with the Saint Order, I am a burden." Charlotte didn't want to stay with the eldest princess at all. Princess May nodded and let go. Charlotte fell from a high altitude and almost died. Fortunately, he activated the blood flame transformation in time, which slightly buffered the momentum before hitting the surface of the sea. Then a wave knocked him down to the bottom of the sea dozens of meters deep. Charlotte hurriedly restored his human form, activated the light agility technique, and floated to the surface of the sea. The three saint orders in the sky had already started fighting. He took a breath and chose to go with the flow instead of jumping on the surface of the sea and running. There were two enemy saints in the sky. If any of them attacked him, he would not be able to survive. How could he expose his target? Charlotte identified the direction and estimated the distance along the way. He chose to swim towards the direction of Jelling Island. He thought that this huge island should be the closest land to him. Charlotte had just experienced a fight and was exhausted, so he did not swim at full speed. He slowly recovered his bloody glory while slowly moving towards the direction of Jelling Island. Soon he could not see the three saints in the sky, nor could he find any warships. Charlotte was just a little relieved that he had regained his freedom, and he felt a huge and incomparable black shadow slowly rising under his feet. He was alarmed and hurriedly fled to the side. Soon a giant whale rushed out of the sea and even jumped into the air. The size of this giant whale was far larger than the largest life on Earth. It was 60 or 70 meters long, like a small mountain. It soared into the air and then slammed into the sea. The surging waves were as high as several stories. Charlotte was like a grain of coffee thrown into a cup and stirred wildly. He could not help but surge into the sky with the waves and then crashed into the sea with the huge waves. For the first time, he knew that the power of nature was so irresistible that even if he was a supernatural being, he was as small as dust. After the giant whale broke through the sea and fell into the sea, it swung its tail and shook Charlotte, who had just stabilized his body, into the air again. When Charlotte fell, he happened to be beside the giant whale. He pulled out the horned eagle and wanted to insert it into the body of the giant whale, but the giant whale just turned around and stared at him with an eye that was bigger than his body. Charlotte put away the horned eagle awkwardly, but unexpectedly found that the giant whale seemed to have a smile in its eyes. The giant whale spread its fins, as if inviting him. Charlotte hesitated for a moment, then jumped up and climbed onto the back of the giant whale. The giant whale did not try to dive into the sea again, nor did it try to jump out of the sea, but swam steadily in a certain direction. Charlotte was very strange. He looked up and looked around. The sea was blue and white, the weather was very good, and the scenery was beautiful, but everything was weird. But things had come to this point, and Charlotte didn't know what to do, so he could only improvise. He tried to take off his clothes one by one, wring them out with his hands, and put them on again. Julian didn't have dry clothes to prepare for him at this time. Although in the martial arts novels on Earth, It is common for martial arts masters to use their internal strength to dry clothes, but this kind of control, I guess there are not many extraordinary people in the entire old continent who can do it. Charlotte knew that he couldn't do it either. Bloody glory didn't have much temperature, but blood flame could set clothes on fire. It only dried the clothes, not burned them. This technique was too difficult. After practicing for several hours on this inexplicably appearing giant whale, Charlotte recovered most of his bloody glory and regained his full combat power. Charlotte's courage also increased. He couldn't help but shout loudly, "Old friend, what's your name?" The giant whale under him seemed to understand and made a loud sound, like singing, but Charlotte couldn't understand the language of the giant whale. He could only spread his hands and said, "Sorry, I don't understand." The giant whale seemed to be very angry at his stupidity and sprayed a stream of water. Charlotte relied on his fast body to dodge most of it, but still let a large area of the clothes that had just been wrung dry get wet again. He decided not to provoke this giant whale anymore and wait patiently. No matter what the giant whale's origins were, he would know it sooner or later. It couldn't be to eat him, right? Charlotte was confident. Regardless of whether it tasted good or not, the portion was definitely not enough. Chapter 216 Pink Meteor. Charlotte didn't know how long it had been. The sky above the ocean was gradually darkening, and the wind was chilly. He was a little hungry. This giant whale should be a supernatural creature. It was so powerful that no fish dared to approach it. Even though Charlotte wanted to catch a few fish to eat raw, he couldn't find the target. He had never experienced such a thing, and he didn't know how long a supernatural person could last without food. As for the injuries on his body, they had already healed for the most part. He performed the blood flame transformation technique, turned into blood flame, and then restored his human appearance. The injuries would be alleviated, but he only lost some blood energy. He changed back and forth 7 or 8 times, and his body was no longer in danger. Charlotte was thinking hard, and suddenly saw a meteor passing by in the sky. He hurriedly made a wish, "Let me get rid of the crisis of the evil god and become a saint." After a while, he felt that this wish was not grand enough. How could a traverser be so unambitious? He made a second wish before the meteor went out, "I hope to become a god." After a while, he found that the meteor was still there, so he made another wish, "A cup of Coke." This time, he found that a meteor in the sky was not the right color, slightly pink, and was falling towards him, getting bigger and bigger. Charlotte hurriedly shouted, "Danger, old friend, let's get out of the way." The giant whale sang loudly and seemed very excited. Charlotte saw that the giant whale didn't seem to understand what danger was. Just as she was about to save herself, she realized that the meteor looked familiar. Sure enough, when the pink meteor passed over his head, he finally saw it clearly. It was a pink fighting spirit, and in the fighting spirit was a woman in a black robe with a graceful figure. Princess May landed on the head of the giant whale, stretched out her slender hand, and patted the big head of the sea monster. The giant whale sang even louder, resounding through the night sky. Charlotte was still in shock and asked, "Did you raise this?" Princess May replied, "I am also a magician part-time, and it is my contracted beast. You can call it Yang Wang Xingquang or Akon like me." In Charlotte's mind, the famous dish of Ingrima suddenly emerged. In any case, she could not associate this giant whale with a basin full of fish heads. The fish and shrimp eaten by this giant whale would probably not die so unwillingly. Charlotte then realized that the eldest princess did not abandon him randomly, but was kind enough to arrange a giant whale to take care of her. No wonder this giant whale is so friendly and so humane. It turns out that it has an owner. Princess May let out a loud and long whistle, which sounded exactly like a whale song, and Yang Wang Xingquang immediately turned its huge body and changed direction. Charlotte then remembered to ask, "How was your battle with the 2 saints? What about James Cook?" Princess May replied while comforting her contracted beast, "I severely damaged a Byron Blood Clan saint. James Cook is not bad. He sank the Byron warship that was fighting with him." Charlotte was overjoyed and shouted, "Then let's go back quickly." Princess May said coldly, "Why go back?" Charlotte was surprised. "We have already defeated the Byron people. Why don't you go back?" Princess May stood on the giant whale's head looking up at the stars, and said, "It's so hard to come out for a breath. Why should we rush back? We just need to get to Fars at about the same time. There are people everywhere on the Titan whale. I feel very uncomfortable staying here. It's far better to be with Akon." Charlotte nodded frequently and thought to herself, okay, just send me back." But after a while, He discovered in despair that the eldest princess obviously did not regard him as a human being, because he did not feel very uncomfortable with him. This is a bit too much. He still wants to be a human being. Princess May was completely different from when she was on the giant whale. She seemed relaxed and carefree. She looked at the starry sky for a while, and took out a huge pillow from somewhere. She walked to Charlotte, put down the pillow, leaned on it, and said, "Continue telling me stories, I want to listen to duets." Charlotte was crying and was about to protest. He hadn't eaten or drunk water all day, but suddenly there was an exquisite kettle and a cake in front of him. He was overjoyed and grabbed the kettle and cake and ate them voraciously. When he almost finished everything, he remembered to ask, "Princess, have you eaten?" Princess May said lightly, "Can I tell a story now?" Charlotte forced herself to cheer up and continued to tell Dewey's story. To be honest, sitting on the back of a giant whale, accompanied by a beautiful princess. Well, Charlotte had never seen Princess May's appearance, so beauty could be temporarily ignored. In fact, the description in words is quite romantic. However, Charlotte felt miserable. There was no shelter on the back of the giant whale. The sea was very hot during the day, and the whale was very slippery. She slept very unsteadily. Although Princess May could provide food, the pastries became less and less fresh as time went by. In short, Charlotte accompanied Princess May, riding on the giant whale to look up at the stars, and traveled on the sea for 7 or 8 days. He was tired of this kind of life. Charlotte missed the VIP room on the giant god whale more and more, not to mention his several properties. Even the deserted Machupi was more comfortable than living on the back of the giant whale. Princess May enjoyed this kind of life very much. Every day, she listened to Charlotte telling classic novels from the earth, and occasionally left for a while to go for a ride nearby. There was even one time when she somehow got a group of whales to accompany her to look up at the stars. It was very imposing. The only thing that comforted Charlotte was that he had been practicing bloody glory all the time these days to resist the scorching sun during the day and the cold night wind at night. On the 7th or 8th day, the blood flame energy shook slightly and broke through again. Another group of runes appeared, and he actually refined the blazing bullet. The blood-sucking scroll that records the secrets of the Adonis blood family has a total of 17 pages, and each page records an Adonis secret. Charlotte has already practiced the first page, blood flame energy, the second page, blood flame transfiguration, the third page, hand of flame, and finally the fourth page, blazing bullet, successfully delaying the time for the blood clan evil god Karnstein to come again by nearly 20 days. The fifth page of the blood-sucking scroll records the secret of the Adonis blood family, magic flame horse. This is a summoning secret. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 217. Well, I dug out his blood core. The magic horse is a type of magic horse. The magic horse is not a creature that exists in the old world. They live in another world and can only be summoned, not raised. They must be locked onto a certain extraordinary object as a carrier of this world and cannot exist independently. The magic horse is the best mount on the battlefield. They charge into battle and hardly get tired. However, once the extraordinary object they rely on is destroyed, they will never appear again. The magic horse transforms once every 100 years. Sometimes it will transform stronger, sometimes it will split into two and transform into two different magic horses, and sometimes it will die directly. Generally speaking, if a magic horse can transform 2 or 3 times, it has a chance to transform into a magic horse. It has almost no entity and can walk on any form of ground, including hills, swamps and water, and can even rush through a sea of fire. The magic horse is extremely difficult to summon. The secret method of the Adonis blood clan can not only summon the magic horse, but also use the blood flame gas to requench the magic horse, so that it can establish an extremely close relationship with the blood clan, and even use the power of the master, or feed back the power to the master. After reading novels to Princess May for a whole day, Charlotte finally relaxed and began to look through the Adonis secret scroll. He was also very interested in the magic flame horse. In ancient China, people rode horses to travel, which was based on the fact that there were post stations and inns everywhere to feed horses, which were convenient places for supply. After a day's journey, as long as they could find a post station or an inn, they could find hay and beans to feed horses. The transportation in the old world was too inconvenient. Although there were knights, cavalry was very uncommon, and there were no corresponding convenient supply points, which made riding horses very inconvenient. They had to solve the problem of hay for horses by themselves, which was a troublesome job. Even in ancient China, cavalry dispatched a large number of servants. In the old world, cavalry dispatched often required more than 10 times the number of infantry to follow and provide logistics. Most importantly, the old world lacked grasslands that were convenient for cavalry to move like the wind, and there were mostly forests on the continent. Charlotte heard that the grasslands in the New World were vast, and the cavalry developed much faster than in the Old World. For creatures from other realms like the magic flame horse, they don't need to be given anything. They only need magic to maintain their existence. Charlotte didn't think much of it. It was a battlefield mount, but it was much faster than a carriage when used to travel. Even if it was dark and luxurious, it was far slower than riding a horse. Charlotte was flipping through the Adona secret scroll, which was the diary of Charlotte Mecklen. Princess May suddenly reached out and took the diary. She took a look at it, threw it to Charlotte, and said, "What level have you cultivated to in bloody glory?" Charlotte whispered, "Level 8. Levels 7 to 12 are all middle-level transcendents. Charlotte is only at the middle level now, and there is still a long way to go before she reaches the high-level transcendent." Princess May didn't say anything, but said lightly, "Not far ahead is St. Michael's Island." Charlotte was slightly surprised and asked, "Street Michael's Island occupied by the Golden Goat Fleet?" Charlotte remembered that crazy horse Davis said, starting from the city of Cappadocia, it takes no more than half a day's voyage to reach St. Michael Island and the Golden Goat Fleet that occupies St. Michael Island. There are more than 30 ships, 3 of which are warships. Now one of the warships should be in Cappadocia, but I don't know what happened to that fleet. Princess May nodded, and then said, "Even I dare not go to St. Michael Island. They have a magic alchemy warship, an ancient magic warship, and a saint in charge." Back then, Zimmerman Axel Robin wanted to conquer all the pirate fleets, so he personally took action and challenged the owner of the Golden Goat Fleet. Charlotte couldn't help asking, what was the result? Princess May replied, "The result is that Zimmerman gave up St. Michael Island." Charlotte originally looked down on the Golden Goat Fleet, but when she heard that this fleet had such a brilliant record, she immediately looked up to it and said, "No wonder Francis Drake and James Cook didn't even talk about attacking this island city." Princess May chuckled and said, "Even if there are saints on their ships, they dare not go to St. Michael Island." Charlotte asked, "If we are not going to St. Michael Island, where should we go?" Princess May said lightly, "Of course, we should go to Cappadocia. Don't you have a fleet there?" Charlotte was a little embarrassed and said, "The method of controlling merchant ships was a bit rough at the beginning, and I didn't leave any managers. The fleet should have disbanded." Princess May said, "Why don't you take a look and you will know?" Charlotte did not argue any more. Anyway, the fleet was gone, so it was no big deal. What if it was still there? Well, how could such a good thing happen? The next day, when the sun rose, Charlotte saw a small hill suddenly appearing on the sea. The whole hill was built into a city. There were huge cannons in every direction. There were 30 or 40 medium and large ships around this island city, but only more than 10 of them were flying the flag of the Golden Goat Fleet. Princess May did not provoke this pirate fleet. She let the giant whale look up at the stars, bypassed St. Michael Island, and turned to Cappadocia. The speed of this giant whale was much faster than that of an ordinary merchant ship. In the afternoon, Charlotte saw this small seaside town again. What surprised him was that although there were indeed no 17 ships at the port of Cappadocia, there were still 5 or 6 merchant ships docked, still flying his flag. Yes, when Charlotte was in Cappadocia, she let the city and merchant ships fly the caravan flag of the Mecklen family. The giant whale was too big to dock, so Charlotte and Princess May jumped into the sea in advance. He used the light and spider techniques to run wildly on the waves. When he approached Cappadocia, someone shouted, "It's Mr. Mecklen." Then, countless residents appeared from nowhere in the entire port, waving their hands, clothes, baskets, and other messy things, and cheered loudly, "Welcome back, Mr. Charlotte Mecklen." Princess May glanced at Charlotte unexpectedly and said, "You are quite popular." Charlotte smiled awkwardly. She didn't expect that she had been away for so long and still had such prestige in the city. As soon as he stepped onto the port, he saw crews, the former chief patrolman of Cappadocia City, coming with a team. When he saw Charlotte, his eyes were filled with tears and he shouted, "I meet Lord Mechlin." Charlotte raised her hand to help him up and asked, "Why are there still 5 or 6 boats left?" "Haven't you all dispersed yet?" Cruz whispered. "They took the alchemical potion and were very worried that they would die. I had no choice but to make some ointment and lie to them that it was an antidote. Unexpectedly, it was quite effective. Now the merchant fleet of Cappadocia has expanded to 23 ships, and several merchant ships have joined on their own initiative. Now most of the merchant ships are not docked at the port, but are out transporting goods, and have not left Cappadocia. Everything in the city is thriving, and life is much better than before." Charlotte glanced at this temporary subordinate and felt for the first time that this guy was actually a talent. His alchemical potion was fake. Under normal circumstances, it would have been discovered soon. Charlotte did not expect that Cruz would take advantage of the situation and make a batch of antidotes by himself, and he actually maintained the fleet. Well, there are still some details that don't match up, but Charlotte does not intend to pursue it for the time being. It is the great wisdom of life to muddle through and be confused. Charlotte took Princess May to the city lord's mansion. Along the way, she found that the population of Cappadocia seemed to be more than before, and the city seemed to have more troops. He asked about Cruz, and the former chief inspector of the city patrol army replied, "Because you rescued the people of Galling Island and liberated them from slavery, many people brought their families to Cappadocia after you left, and also attracted some residents from other cities. Now Cappadocia has nearly 10,000 residents." Charlotte did not expect that this city would give him an even bigger surprise. He asked around again, and he could not understand why a city with almost no one managing it would become better and better. As long as the officials do not make trouble, will the people live a good life themselves? This idea is too dangerous. It is better not to have any idea that is not conducive to the Empire's notification. Charlotte did not introduce Princess May's identity to anyone. The people of Galling Island have no good impression of the Ingrima Empire. After all, the General Affairs Chief of Ingrima here has participated in the slave trade, capturing the natives of Galling Island and selling them to slave traders. Princess May dressed simply in a black robe, wrapping herself tightly, and did not look like a princess. Charlotte's prestige in Cappadocia City is very high, and no one dared to ask, how can the ladies around him always be replaced with new ones? Charlotte first arranged a place for Princess May to live, and then pretended to handle the government affairs of Cappadocia. When he left, the town had very good public security because of the existence of the Knights of Favonius. Because there were no tax collectors, the residents lived a relaxed life and the business developed. Compared with when he left, the business was almost twice as prosperous. Not long after Charlotte returned to the city lord's mansion, Zeman hurried over. When he saw Charlotte, he was also very happy, and he didn't look like he was forced. Charlotte asked Cruz to do something, and summoned Zeman alone, asking, "How is your health recently?" Zeman coughed and whispered, "I know you didn't give us the alchemical potion, because many people left Cappadocia to transport goods, and nothing happened. It's completely different from the potion you described. I also asked people to stop the antidote, and no one died as a result." Charlotte didn't expect Zeman to be so frank, and was very surprised and asked, "Why don't you leave?" Zeman smiled and said, "Because, you don't know how much money we can make after forming a fleet. It is much more profitable than a single merchant ship. And your city of Cappadocia does not collect taxes, and everyone likes it here. We do business to make money. What do you think?" Charlotte pondered for a moment. He really didn't expect that things would turn out this way. In the next 10 days, Princess May didn't say she was leaving. She didn't lock herself up like she did on Breton and the Titanic. Instead, she went out shopping every day and walked through every corner of Cappadocia, quite excited. It was not until more than 10 days later that Charlotte told Dewey about the death of Prince Chen in the novel. The eldest princess flew into a rage and scolded the author of the novel for a long time. She also cursed every friend he knew for not paying for meals. And she made a vicious plan to find a dozen beautiful young women to pretend to be readers and visit the author every day when they arrived in Strasbourg. Charlotte is now more and more fortunate that the author has not traveled through time. If they were in the same world, he would definitely be beaten. Princess May didn't want to continue listening to the story for 2 days. She just kept muttering, "Why did Prince Chen die? Such a good character, why did the author write him to death? This guy must have been brought up by a stepmother when he was young." So he has the temperament of a stepmother. On the third day, Princess May finally relented and asked Charlotte to prepare a merchant ship so that they could set off for Fars. Although Charlotte was very comfortable staying in Cappadocia, she had long been eager to return home and wanted to go back to Fars, to Strasbourg, and to see Anne. Zeman arranged the cleanest merchant ship for Charlotte, which was his original white tea, and Charlotte and Princess May boarded the ship and set off. This time, the two did not encounter any risks. When the merchant ship docked at the port of Fars a few days later, Princess May took out a small blood-colored heart collar, threw it to Charlotte, and said, "You have worked so hard to tell stories along the way, this is my reward." Charlotte took the bloody heart collar. This bloody heart core was crystal clear, with a faint golden glow. There were some tiny golden spots inside. It looked very beautiful. She thought it was the heart core of some monster. She thought to herself, "I won't be a monster hunter. It's useless to take it. I can sell it." But the next second, his face changed, and he asked hesitantly, "Is this thing from that blood clan saint?" Princess May got off the boat, looked around for a while, and was very disappointed with the scenery of Fars. She said, "Yes." Charlotte asked in disbelief, "You said you severely injured him." "Do you mean?" Princess May said lightly, "Well, I dug out his blood core." Charlotte looked at the bloody heart core in her hand, and her heart was shocked for a long time. "That's right. This is a blood core of the blood clan saint. It is a priceless treasure." Chapter 218 County Artanan. Charlotte took another careful look and finally confirmed that the tiny golden spots she had just seen were actually blood runes. Charlotte slightly activated the bloody glory to check and confirmed that it was the blood core of the Duolian clan. The secret method of the Duolian clan is based on the blood chain technique. After being promoted to a supernatural being, one can condense a blood chain. There are infinite secret methods and they are best at long-range attacks. Although the Duolian clan is not a clan of the 3 emperors or the 6 kings, the secret method of the clan is very powerful. Many famous supernatural beings have emerged and made countless contributions to the Baron Empire. Princess May had no interest in this port and said, "Let's set off. Get to Strasbourg as soon as possible." Charlotte hurriedly released the dark luxury. Princess May got on the carriage and closed the door. Charlotte touched her nose and knew that it was not appropriate for a foreign man to ride in a carriage with a princess. She could only sit in the driver's seat in dismay. Fortunately, the driver's seat of dark luxury was quite comfortable, with a canopy above his head, and the magic horses did not need to be driven. He issued instructions to the 8 magic horses, and dark luxury galloped towards Strasbourg. Charlotte flipped through the secret scrolls by herself, thinking about how to digest this blood core, which was quite cool and comfortable. Because of the boiling of original blood, if you want to swallow this blood core, you can't use bloody glory, nor the secret methods of other clans. You must practice the secret method of the Duolian clan to the boiling of original blood, and condense the blood core before you can start to digest this holy blood core. Of course, using it in this way will definitely cause a lot of waste. The holy blood core can only push a person to the initial stage of the high level at most, and it is impossible to transform without loss. If you want to avoid waste, you can use it to create a holy level extraordinary object to best play the value of the blood core, but if you want to create a holy level extraordinary object, at least a holy level alchemist must take action. Charlotte didn't know an alchemist of this level, and this level of extraordinary artifacts, in addition to blood cores, also required countless precious materials, and the cost of making them was also sky high. Although Charlotte could afford it, she didn't really want to invest. Because for him, even if a saint-level extraordinary artifact was made, it might not be kept. Saints might not be interested in human wealth, but they would definitely try to snatch a saint-level extraordinary artifact. Charlotte was only a mid-level one. Even at the high level, he could not use the extraordinary items of the saint level. He held the blood core and pondered for a long time, thinking to himself, this saint level of the blood clan probably has more than 10 years to go and cannot condense the blood core again. As for whether he can recover his strength, it depends on luck. Maybe he can recover in 10 years, maybe in decades, or maybe he can never recover. The lifespan of the saint level of the blood clan is longer than that of humans, and their strength is relatively strong. The eldest princess can dig out the blood core of one of them in a 1-on-2 situation. I wonder how terrifying her strength is. Charlotte put the blood core on her right arm and pressed it hard. The blood core penetrated the skin and entered a bloody vortex on her right arm. Charlotte raised her arm and looked at it carefully, and felt that there was no flaw. The blood core is the condensed bloody vortex. It was a coincidence that the seventh bloody vortex opened by his bloody glory was originally intended to condense the bloody rune of the Duolian family. If it were any other bloody vortex, it would be repelled by Dalian's original blood and it would be impossible to hide in it, but this bloody vortex was just the right place to hide Dalian's blood core. After collecting the blood core, Charlotte decided to ignore this treasure for the time being and continue to study the Adonis secret scroll and delve into the secret method of the magic flame horse. The secret method of Adonis is based on blood flame energy. All supernatural changes are derived from blood flame energy. Blood flame deformation, flaming hands, and blazing bombs are almost all advanced applications of blood flame energy. But the magic flame horse, which can also be called summoning magic flame horse, is different. It uses Adonis blood energy as bait to lure a magic flame horse from another world and then control it with secret methods. Charlotte reversed the bloody glory and converted all his blood energy into blood flame energy. The two blood-sucking weapons on his body were immediately eager to move. Whether it was the blood rose or the withered rose, they seemed to be responding to the blood flame energy. Although these two weapons belong to the Asilo clan, the blood flame key can resonate with any clan's blood-sucking weapons and manipulate them. Charlotte was used to fighting with the 12 angels, but after switching to the blood flame key, he knew that his fighting style would inevitably change accordingly. For example, he held the blood rose, but there was always a burning hand holding the withered rose. If his collapsed mountain was still with him, it would be two more burning hands to manipulate the collapsed mountain, or he could use the collapsed mountain himself and let the two burning hands use the blood rose and the withered rose respectively. Although the Adonis clan is only one of the 6 kings, its combat power has always been boasted to be strong, because as long as a vampire of the Adonis clan cultivates the blood flame key, he will have the ability to attack from a distance. As long as he cultivates the burning hand, it is equivalent to having an extra clone. If it were not for the fact that cultivating an extra burning hand would consume too much time, and several burning hands would be dispatched together, it would be equivalent to several vampires of the Adonis clan besieging and fighting in a group. Therefore, the Adonis clan has always been called the most shameless vampire. Even other vampire clans don't like them very much, and they are even more unwilling to duel with the Adonis clan because they always suffer too much. The speed of dark luxury is very fast, but there have been many wars in Fars. Charlotte encountered several battles along the way, but his current strength is also very strong, and it is no problem for him to deal with a few soldiers. What's more, Charlotte is accompanied by a saint-level Princess Ingrama. Whether it is a small group of Byron soldiers, the Black Phoenix dynasty, or the Orc warriors, they can't do anything to him. Charlotte didn't encounter a large army along the way, whether it was the enemy or the friendly army. A few days later, he rushed back to Fars. The first thing Charlotte could do was, of course, to report to the General Office of the Central Government, and then the General Office of the Central Government would come forward and submit the official documents to the residence of the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Count D'Artagnan heard that Princess Guillaume of Ingrama had arrived in Strasbourg, so he hurried over. It was the first time that Charlotte had seen this hereditary earl who held a high position in the empire. When Count D'Artagnan was young, he must have been a handsome man. Now he was still a handsome uncle, and he took care of his image meticulously. According to the etiquette of the empire, he invited Princess May to stay in a palace of the royal family. When receiving Princess May, the earl did not forget to comfort Charlotte and let her go home and wait for the next arrangement of the empire. Charlotte had been away for too long, and finally returned to Strasbourg. She also wanted to relax a little and did not have to participate in the reception of the princess. Instead, she was a little happy in her heart. After saying goodbye to Count D'Artagnan, he went back to number 58, Champs-Élysées. Chapter 219 New Appointment. Although he already had an apartment at 221B Baker Street in the Val d'Oise district, Charlotte was still used to 58 Champs-Élysées. First, the house there was bigger, and second, there were Mrs. Nancy and Mrs. Wu Mizijiang there, and the personal service was always more thoughtful. Most importantly, he also had 3 clever cats, and the kittens were at their cutest and most playful. On the way back to 58 Champs-Élysées, he went to 1 Falcon Street. Dorothy had a residence in Strasbourg. She was an unmarried lady and still lived with her parents, so she was not in the patrol army office in the Lucavero district, but Anastasia and Belissa were there, as well as his 18 Red Bear warriors. They all returned to Strasbourg earlier than Charlotte. Charlotte took back her 2 knight lances, Collapse Mountain and Killer Whale, Shishimaru, and another magic rapier. As for the anti-space long-range rifle, 2 silver rhinos, the assassin's dagger, the blood-sucking hand axe, the magic alchemy staff and some other items that he never left behind, they were all in Machupi. He couldn't get them back that day. In fact, many of the wealth didn't need to be taken back. After all, for Charlotte, the Savings Association was not safe. Machupi was the real safe place. Back at number 58, Champs-Élysées, Charlotte sent Mrs. Nancy to tell Anne, Dorothy, Vinnie Arsenault and Sylvie Martin about it. This was his only social circle in Strasbourg. As for the Lima Detective Agency, Charlotte planned to go there in person when she had time, so she didn't have to deliver the letter. Charlotte didn't expect that after these messages were reported, several ladies came to number 58, Champs-Élysées one after another. Anne was the first to arrive because Mrs. Nancy was the first to send her a message. When she saw Charlotte, Anne's eyes were misty. During this period, she was really worried to death. Especially Dorothy, who came back early, also brought bad news. Charlotte is seducing 2 blood clan saints of Byron with the Grand Princess of the Ingrima Empire. This is really not good news. Knowing that Charlotte has returned safely, Anne doesn't care about anything else. She must meet her Mr. Mecklin and is determined not to wait until the next day. Vinnie Arsenault and Sylvie Martin came together. Vinnie Arsenault, the famous female detective, didn't expect Charlotte to be promoted so quickly. She even wanted to move the detective agency to the Lucavero district. After all, in the Lucavero district, Charlotte is truly all-powerful. Dorothy was the last one to come. She went to number 1 Falcon Street first and brought Anastasia and Belissa over. When Charlotte saw the 3 of them, the curse of the Grand Princess suddenly popped up in her mind. Well, it's not a curse that every friend that a certain author knows doesn't like to pay for meals. It was to find a dozen beautiful young women to pretend to be readers and visit the author every day. In Charlotte's mind, all she could think of was that if Princess May appeared again, a sure banquet could probably be held here. The most luxurious grade. Number 58 Chrysanthemum Avenue had never had so many beautiful women. Charlotte's mood had never been so complicated. He wanted to slap himself. What message was he sending to Dorothy? Fortunately, Miss Anne de Breton was a very generous girl, especially since her portrait was hung in the living room on the first floor of number 58 Chrysanthemum Avenue, which made her feel confident. She even showed a bit of the hostess's style and helped arrange an afternoon tea. In terms of the complexity of her mood, Miss Sylvie Martin was the next most complicated person below Charlotte. She is now Charlotte's cousin, but in fact, she is his ex-fiancée. If we talk about a person who knows Charlotte best, it must be her. Sylvie Martin knew how bad this cousin, the ex-fiancé, was, but she could never have imagined that after just a few years of not seeing him, this ex-fiancé had changed so drastically. She always thought that Charlotte was a prodigal son who had returned. But when Sylvie saw the 5 girls who came to visit number 58, Élysée Field Street, each of them had the best appearance, and their family backgrounds were high and low, but they were all extraordinary. Even the lowest one, Belissa, was the Duchess's personal maid and had seen big scenes. The most important thing was that except for her, Sylvie, all 5 of them were extraordinary. She now suspected that this ex-fiancé was not a prodigal son who had returned, but had transformed into a higher-level expert in hunting for beauties. Anne de Brittany, daughter of the Earl, 4th year of Gorgias University, 1st level extraordinary. Dorothy, a lady of the Soumrier family, graduated from Gorgias University, 3rd level extraordinary. Anastasia, the illegitimate daughter of Baron File, graduated from Hattingen Thunder and Storm University, 2nd level extraordinary. Belissa, the personal maid of Duchess Joseph, taught herself the courses of Gorgia University and was a 2nd level extreme soarer. Vinnie Arsenault was not included, otherwise it would be too scary. Sylvie would never believe that this former fiancé could even deal with high-level extraordinary people. In Sylvie's mind, she even thought of a possibility. If I hadn't broken off the engagement and married Charlotte, would there be a noble lady holding a child and crying every morning when I opened the door of my house? Well, there might be some older and beautiful ladies, or even angry gentlemen holding rapiers. That kind of life, I don't want it. Brokening the engagement was my best choice. The only thing that comforted Charlotte was that he really had no special relationship with the young ladies, not even an ambiguous one, so after accompanying the guests for a while, he quietly withdrew from the circle of ladies, holding his 3 clever cat kittens, and continued to think about the diary in the corner. On the one hand, Charlotte worked hard to practice every day and tried to improve his strength. On the other hand, he was deeply afraid of the two evil gods and did not completely believe in this diary. He thought for a while, took a glass of beer, drank it, and felt refreshed all over. Since he obtained the passage between the Silver Pigeon Castle and Machupi, he has never lacked the beer of the Silver Pigeon Castle. The beer of the Silver Pigeon Castle is much better than the beer of Strasbourg. This drink, which tastes a bit like beer, makes Charlotte very fond of it. He rarely drinks the fruit wine produced in Strasbourg. Of course, he has no way to get the more expensive champagne for the time being. When he was in Anglima, whether it was Count Landmark or the Red Dragon Palace, it seemed to be everywhere and at his fingertips, but back in Fars, the origin of champagne, Charlotte couldn't get the real champagne. At this time, Vinnie Orsino and Sylvie were about to say goodbye. After all, it was getting late. Charlotte took the diary and asked Mrs. Nancy to take out the gift she bought in Anglima, handed them to the two ladies, and sent them out of number 58, Champs-Élysées. Dorothy also took Anastasia and Belissa to say goodbye. Charlotte also sent the three ladies away. They didn't need gifts anymore, after all, they had been to Anglima together. The rules of the Breton family were very strict, and Anne could not stay for long. She waited until everyone else left before getting up and whispered, "I have already inquired, and your new appointment is still to the Principality of Behemoth." Charlotte asked in surprise, "Why are you going back to Behemoth again?" Anne said, "Our battle with Byron in Verdun was not going well, so someone suggested that we attack the South Seraph territory, not for occupation or victory, but just to track some of the Byron troops." Charlotte was speechless. This battle plan was somewhat feasible, but why did he go again? Anne hugged him and said softly, "But this time, your commander is my cousin, he will take care of you." Charlotte wanted to ask more details, but Anne was anxious to go home, so he didn't ask any more questions. Anyway, she would not leave in the next few days, and there was still enough time. After Charlotte sent Anne away, number 58 Élysée Field Street became quiet, with only the magical portrait of Anne Breton on the first floor, bowing slightly and performing a court ceremony. Charlotte smiled slightly and returned an imperial salute. He said loudly to Mrs. Nancy, "Take me to Baker Street tomorrow, and remember to remind me to bring some things with me." Mrs. Nancy agreed and went back to the basement with Mrs. Wu Mizijiang. Although Anne bought some things at 221B Baker Street, Val d'Oise, she still lacked the beer that Charlotte was used to drinking, the fruit wine for entertaining guests, coffee, and other sundries. Charlotte expected that she might go to 221B Baker Street, Val d'Oise often, so she had to prepare for a rainy day. In the next few days, Charlotte kept going back and forth between several departments except for dating Anne. He did not expect that the political identity of the Fars Empire's special envoy to the Ingrimer Empire as the plenipotentiary war commissioner was not something that could be resigned after returning from the mission, but a semi-permanent political identity. Every time he returned from the mission, he had to do a lot of paperwork. For example, he obtained the position of Red Dragon Palace Book Commissioner and the 24th level first-level political participant in Ingrimer. All these had to be reported to the higher authorities. Most of the time, the central government office and the foreign minister's residence would review and approve and allow concurrent appointments, but there were also a few times when it would be very troublesome. Charlotte did not encounter any trouble, and no one blocked him, but the procedures in government documents were cumbersome to the point of being overwhelming. After going around for a few days, he also found out about his new appointment. This matter also had to do with Claire Breton, a rising star in the Imperial Army who performed very well in Philandon, so he was named commander to command the military operation into the South Seraph territory. The person who recommended Charlotte to Claire Breton turned out to be Her Majesty the Queen. Chapter 220 Breton Offensive. Charlotte was still at sea when James Cook sent Aurora, Dorothy and others back to Fars. Emperor Julius Axel approved the documents about this matter. It was coincidentally that the Queen came to see her husband and casually mentioned, "Charlotte Mecklen is also very talented. Let him help Claire Breton." Emperor Julius Axel VI, without any consideration, agreed to his beloved wife's request, and Charlotte became Claire Breton's subordinate. This matter seems to be purely accidental. It was not pushed by any big man. It is said that after the Count of Brittany learned about this, he called his daughter over and told her the whole story. Otherwise, Anne would not have known so much. On the 6th day after Charlotte returned to Strasbourg, he had an unexpected guest at his mansion at 221B Baker Street in the Val d'Oise district. No, strictly speaking, there were two. Charlotte had originally agreed with Anne to meet at 221B Baker Street, Val d'Oise, but when someone knocked on the door, she opened it and saw two men and one woman. The woman was naturally Anne, and the two men were Claire Brittany and Abner Sumi. Charlotte was slightly surprised, but quickly invited the three people into the room and asked, "When did you two gentlemen return to Strasbourg?" Abner Sumi smiled and said, "A few days later than you. We have been coordinating logistical supplies these days, and we are almost crazy busy. We were originally worried that the quality of the additional knights was not enough and they would be useless in battle. Later, we learned that there was your Knights of Favonius, Charlotte, and we were finally relieved." Charlotte asked, "How many knights are there in total?" Claire Breton replied indifferently, 7. "But except for the Purple Arc Knights and Fabry's Knights that I took over, all of them were knights transferred from local troops, and the quality of the soldiers is very poor. Well, in fact, the soldiers of Fabry's Knights are also very bad." Charlotte couldn't help but smile. She certainly knew what Baron Febril's knights were like. To be honest, it was not even enough for a single assault of his Knights of Favonius. You have to know that the Knights of Favonius had a very poor foundation and was already a standard miscellaneous Knights order. With the promotion of her position, Charlotte has had some connections. She has recently found out a lot of information and asked, "Isn't the Purple Sparrow Knights the Knights of Viscount Bronton?" Claire Breton said, "Yes, it is the Knights of Viscount Bronton. On the battlefield of Philandon, we, Fars and Byron, have successively invested a large number of troops, and have increased the number of knights to dozens of groups. The two sides have been fighting so far, and each has lost more than a dozen senior generals. In total, 7 or 8 knight groups have been defeated." Abner Sumi said, "Viscount Bronton died on the battlefield and has no direct descendants. After his knights were regathered by the Empire, they were handed over to Claire Breton, who performed well on the battlefield." Claire Breton spread his hands and said, "As a result, I gained command of a cavalry regiment, and was transferred out of Philandon to become the temporary military archon of the Principality of Behemoth." Charlotte was really surprised this time. This means that after the death of Archduke Ferdinand and Archduke Joseph, the Principality of Behemoth is no longer controlled by the families of the two archdukes, and is directly under the Empire. The local forces of the Empire are divided into counties directly under the Empire, autonomous territories of local people, territories of nobles, overseas territories, and overseas vassal states. The military consul is the highest political official in the autonomous territories. In other words, Claire Breton replaced the original Behemoth family and became the temporary master of this principality. Abner Sumi smiled and said, "Claire Breton is responsible for integrating all the military forces of the Principality of Behemoth and attacking the South Seraph territory. Even this military operation is named after his surname and is called the Brittany Offensive." Charlotte tilted her head and thought to herself, "If someone says that this matter was not promoted by Count Brittany, I will definitely despise his IQ." He naturally knew why Claire Breton and Abner Sumi came here. Claire Breton needs to completely control all the armies of the Principality of Behemoth, and Charlotte Mecklen naturally has the mark of the Breton family. Although Anne has not said a word since she entered the room, the living room of the mansion at 221B Baker Street is hung with a magical oil painting of Miss Brittany, smiling sweetly. This is no longer a hint. Charlotte shook a small brass clock in the corner of the hall. After a while, the butler of the apartment came to the door and asked politely, "Excuse me, sir, what do you need?" Charlotte said, "Send 4 cups of coffee and 4 servings of food." He paid a foral and said, "The rest is a tip." The apartment butler left happily. After a while, the apartment butler brought coffee, set meals, and some desserts. Charlotte invited Claire Breton, Abner Sumi, and Anne to the restaurant for dinner, and said, "I will definitely support Claire with all my strength, don't worry about me." Claire smiled slightly. He didn't think Charlotte would refuse. After all, the two sides were just a little bit away from becoming relatives. The Brittany family now has only one earl, but there may not be only one earl in the future. Claire Breton was in a good mood because the trip went smoothly, and he also told Charlotte a little private matter. "Abner Sumi and I have experienced one battle after another in Philandon, and we have already condensed the proof of war. Now both of us have collected the proofs of the 8 knights, and we are just a little bit away from the opportunity. Next, It depends on who of us will take the lead and become the youngest saint in the Far's empire. Oh, only those who are still alive. Charlotte couldn't help but smile. He knew who Claire Breton was talking about, although he knew that the real youngest saint was not dead yet. Charlotte made a joke. Unfortunately, I am neither a knight nor young, so I can only be a spectator and cannot participate in this kind of competition. Claire Breton glanced at Charlotte, feeling quite emotional. When they first met, it was Anne who asked him to help in the duel, but he had to break the appointment because the army was on the move. This was simply a blasphemy for Claire Breton, and he had to promise to pay for friendship forever, and then he felt a little better. But then, Charlotte actually killed the senior manager of the detective agency in the duel. Claire Breton could not tell Harriet's identity, which made him look at Charlotte with a new eye. But he did not expect that he still underestimated this future cousin-in-law. In Silver Pigeon Castle, Charlotte actually charged into the battle alone and killed Jonan. In Mostar Castle, she killed two extraordinary people and a high-level extraordinary person, Zalman, from the South Seraph Restoration Army. Although she cannot be compared with him, she can be regarded as a little military god of the younger generation in the army. Recently, Charlotte went to Ingrima as an envoy and actually had a duel with the youngest lion in Britain. It was said that it was for a lady from the Sumrei family. Although this news made Anne so angry that she smashed a set of tableware, it also made Charlotte Mecklen officially famous in the old continent and no longer an unknown person. Claire Brittany thought of this and laughed secretly. He knew how angry his cousin was at that time, but he didn't think it was a big deal. Charlotte would not stay in Ingrima and not come back. Well, Anne never mentioned Aurora in front of Charlotte from beginning to end. Abner Sumrei was also considered an insider. He laughed and said, "Mecklen, you will catch up with us sooner or later." Charlotte didn't think that she would be able to become a saint soon. She was not even sure when she would be promoted to a high level. He shrugged his shoulders, skipped the subject and said, "Next, when will you set off? My knights of Favonius were left in Machupi. We can just take them with us on the way to the Principality of Behemoth." Claire Brittany said, "I don't know for the time being. You have to know that the efficiency of the Empire has never been very high." He pushed away the dinner plate and said, "I'm done eating. It's been really hard these past few days. Abner Sumrei and I haven't had a proper meal. I'm having a great time staying here with you, but we still have things to do, so I won't disturb you and Annie." Claire Brittany came here to confirm whether Charlotte would join him. Although the relationship between the two sides was good, he still had to take this step personally and it couldn't be taken for granted. Since it was confirmed that Charlotte, the prospective cousin-in-law, would stand firmly on his side, he would prepare for other things. This was the first time that Claire Breton led troops independently, and he wanted to fight this battle beautifully. Charlotte did not try to stop him and said, "When you leave, remember to call me." Abner Sumrei laughed and followed Claire Breton's steps and left 221B Baker Street, Val d'Oise. As soon as the two left, Anne became lively and walked around the room. Although she bought a lot of things, she was still not satisfied. She pulled Charlotte to buy some more things. Although 58 Élysée Field Street was Charlotte's home, Anne had no sense of belonging. Although she also left her own personal mark there, 221B Baker Street, Val d'Oise was chosen by her personally, and she had a different feeling. She wanted to decorate it warmly and sweetly. Charlotte would naturally not be disappointed and accompanied Anne out. He still remembered that he still owed a balance for the house at 58 Avenue des Champs-Élysées, and on the way he discussed with Anne whether he should pay off the balance first. Chapter 221 Angry Banana. Charlotte received salaries in 2 countries and had a quota for a private night order. Not counting savings, in terms of income alone, she didn't need the final payment for the purchase of number 58, Rue de l'Élysée. Anne also agreed that he should deal with the debt. This matter was very convenient for Charlotte to handle. He gave Anne a sum of écus, and Anne would naturally bring him back the corresponding debt documents. The two left the Val d'Oise district, but did not go to the Picardy district. The goods in the Picardy district were very complete, but not high-end. If you want to buy high-end goods, you have to go to the Alexandria district. Although Anne tried to be thrifty, she was the daughter of the Count of Brittany after all, so during this shopping trip, Charlotte knew what consumption meant. They spent a total of 52 écus. Well, converted into RMB, nearly 1 million was spent. Miss Anne of Brittany paid for the whole process. Mr. Charlotte Mecklen was only responsible for signing the delivery address. Charlotte knew that this day would come sooner or later, and he had already prepared for it, so he chose to accept it silently. After the two of them bought something, they returned to 221B Baker Street in the Val d'Oise district. Charlotte saw a carriage parked in front of the door, but the people in the carriage did not get off, and they were obviously waiting for someone. Charlotte was about to move the things in with Anne, when she heard a voice saying, "You really live here? I came here to ask why the two books can't be bought in the bookstore in Fars." Charlotte was completely stiff. Not to mention the old world, even on Earth, it was not easy to find these two books in a bookstore. Although online novels are published, the print run is small, and they are not popular books. The distribution in bookstores is generally poor. Princess May, dressed in a black robe, got off the carriage, saw Anne, and nodded slightly, which was considered a greeting. Afraid that Anne would misunderstand, Charlotte hurriedly introduced, "This is Princess May Guillaume, the aunt of His Majesty Alfred Guillaume. This time she is representing Ingrima to our Fars Empire. This is Anne. Anne of Brittany, the beloved daughter of Count Brittany and my good friend, Princess May. Please come in and I will tell you in detail." Charlotte's mind was racing. Even after everyone entered the room and ordered coffee for everyone, he still couldn't think of a suitable reason. In the end, he could only bite the bullet and said, "I also saw these two books in a bookstore in the Principality of Behemoth when I was a child, so there are no such books in Strasbourg. They are all very old books, and maybe the publisher has run out of stock." Princess May seemed very regretful, and murmured to herself, "I also flipped through the novels of Fars, and they are still those books. They are no different from Ingrima, and are far inferior to the stories of Roland and Duva. How could such a good novel not be a bestseller?" Anne looked at the two of them curiously, and she wisely said nothing. Princess May stayed for a while, then said to Charlotte, "I'm going to Behemoth now." Charlotte's forehead was sweating again. There was no way Behemoth could have these two books. But he couldn't slap himself in the face right now, so he could only say awkwardly, "I wish you a safe journey." Princess May stayed for a while, then stood up and left. If Anne wasn't there, she wouldn't mind and let Charlotte continue to tell her stories, but Anne was there. She also had to behave like a princess. After seeing Princess May off, Charlotte decided to confess half of it first. She whispered, "I'm in trouble." Anne asked, "How am I in trouble?" Charlotte cut off the beginning and the end, picked out the key points, and said, "The princess is a novel fan and brought a novel on board. I was inappropriate and showed a little contempt, so I was almost beaten to death by the princess. I was in a hurry and said that I had seen better novels, and made up one on the spot. I didn't expect to escape the disaster, but caused more trouble." Anne was surprised and said, "You can also write novels." Charlotte immediately told Anne some of the contents of the two fantasy novels. Anne's eyes became brighter and brighter, and she whispered, "I have a way." Charlotte asked, "What way?" Anne said, "I will find a few quick clerks, and you recite the novel to them. After it is sorted out, we will find a publisher to publish it. This way we can deal with it." Charlotte was surprised and happy, and asked, "Can it be like this?" Anne nodded and said, "Leave it to me, I can bring people over tomorrow." Charlotte breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Anne, you are really my lucky goddess." Anne of Brittany smiled brightly. She believed what Charlotte said. Charlotte didn't know Princess May. She used to be an earthling. After crossing over she was the son of a merchant. She didn't know about the affairs of the upper class. But as a lady of the Brittany family, how could Anne not know about this eldest princess? May Guillaume loved novels, and the fact that her husband was killed by Zimmerman in a duel had long spread throughout the old world. Anne had already had a high opinion of Charlotte's abilities, otherwise she wouldn't have gradually started to associate with him, but Anne didn't expect that Charlotte actually understood novels. Charlotte crossed over and was busy surviving. She had no idea that novelists in the old world actually had a very high status. Many famous novelists could even go in and out of the palace and tell the royal family and the nobles about their latest novels. Anne had also liked a few novels, but she occasionally discovered that Charlotte was very disgusted with novels, and she thought he didn't like them, so she deliberately hid this hobby. And once secretly regretted that Mr. Mecklin didn't like novels. She might have to hide this hobby from him and read novels from him. But she didn't expect that Charlotte didn't dislike reading novels, but felt that these novels were too bad. She could write the best novels herself. Anne only listened to Charlotte's synopsis and felt that these two novels were indeed better than any novels in the old world. Especially, of course, Charlotte mentioned the death of Prince Chen. Anne felt heartbroken. How could Du Wei not live happily with Prince Chen? When Anne decided to publish, she asked someone to write a sequel and put it in the main text. She wanted to find the best novelist to make Du Wei and Prince Chen live happily together. Well, Charlotte didn't know that Anne would do this. If he knew, he would definitely persuade Anne not to let this gunman use his real name and common pen name, but to change to an Anglima-style pen name, Angry Banana. It helps to live 100 years. Chapter 222 Emerging Writer, Anne Mecklin. While Charlotte was patiently waiting for news from Claire Breton, Anne assigned him 15 quick clerks. Charlotte recited 5,000 words every day, and then immediately replaced them. She always kept these quick clerks at the highest speed, and they could actually produce 50 or 60,000 words every day. These manuscripts would then be sent to a publisher who had some relationship with the Breton family. The manuscripts would be sorted out at night, with illustrations, and every 60,000 words would be edited into a volume. In just 7 days, the first volume of the 2 books was on the shelves of major bookstores in Strasbourg. Charlotte was a very face-conscious person. She insisted on not signing her name on the 2 books, and gave the right to sign to Anne. After Anne was sure that he really didn't want to sign, she used the pen name of Anne Mecklin and published the 2 novels. Yes, the extra chapter about Du Wei and Prince Chen's love for each other was also published under this pen name. Charlotte was afraid that Princess May would find out that the Behemoth Principality did not have these 2 books, and she would dig something out of herself. The eldest princess fought 2 people at once, severely damaged a saint of the Dolian blood clan, and dug out the opponent's blood core. This record really made Charlotte remember it too deeply. Senior Sister Menelman was not so cruel. So Charlotte relied on her extraordinary status to work non-stop every day and recite books crazily. Claire Brittany and Abner Sumrei have not come these days. They are very busy. This time the Purple Goldfinch Knights went on an expedition, which was also an opportunity for the 2. They were not the direct descendants of the family, and they had no chance to inherit the title in the future. They had to rely on themselves to fight. Not every noble was born with a silver spoon in their mouths, and some were born with a gilded spoon in their mouths. Charlotte tried hard to memorize the manuscript. Days passed by. Originally, when he was away from home, he missed Strasbourg very much. But during this period of time, he suddenly missed the days in the Silver Pigeon Castle, Mostar Castle, Cappadocia City, and Breton. In fact, his life in those cities was really good. He didn't have to memorize the novels of the earth every day like now. You know, these 2 novels are more than 3 million words. There has never been such a long masterpiece in the old world. Moreover, the story can be exciting all the way, with ups and downs. It seems very enjoyable, but it is a kind of pain to memorize. Charlotte didn't know how many times she thought about deleting the plot and ending the 2 novels. But when she thought of Princess May's fierceness, she thought that if she ended the novel, the eldest princess of Ingram would make her childless. A week after the novel was published, Claire Breton finally settled the military affairs and came to inform Charlotte that she could set off. Charlotte breathed a sigh of relief and packed her bags to set off. Anne thoughtfully prepared a small team to assist him in his creation. This team has 10 horses and 15 fast clerks, which can ensure that Charlotte can recite anytime and anywhere when she is busy with military affairs, and can also send a batch of manuscripts back to Strasbourg by express horse every few days. Neither Claire Breton nor Abner Sumrei said anything about this. When Charlotte set out, she brought Dorothy, Anastasia, Belissa, 18 Red Bear warriors, and all the patrol soldiers of number 1 Falcon Street, which actually had nearly 200 people. Of course, this small team is nothing compared to the other knights. Claire Breton currently only controls 2 knights. The other 5 have always been Charlotte's Knights of Favonius, who are currently in Machupi. One is Baron Febeli's Knights, who have returned to the Silver Pigeon Castle. The other is the defeated army under Archduke Joseph, who gathered and guarded the Mostar Castle. The remaining 2 are local troops of the Principality of Behemoth, and the composition is complicated. Claire Breton wants to subdue these forces one by one. Although it is a bit difficult, he is still full of confidence. After all, there is already a good start. The most capable Knights of Favonius have sworn allegiance, and the commander of the Knights is absolutely trustworthy. Charlotte followed the army and made a request to Claire Breton to go to Machupi to bring the army back after a day of action. Claire Breton of course immediately agreed. He took 2 main legions to continue the action, but Charlotte followed the majority and went straight to Machupi. Machupi was the first labyrinth he got, and the only one that had been labyrinthified 3 times. It could almost be considered Charlotte's greatest legacy. Charlotte didn't care about the fleet in Cappadocia, because he knew he couldn't control it, but he left his most loyal subordinates in Machupi's Knights of Favonius. Charlotte took Dorothy and others back to Machupi. Charlotte found from a distance that Machupi was somewhat different from when he left, and it was much more lively than when he left. Charlotte was slightly puzzled. As soon as he approached Machupi, he heard someone excitedly shouting, "Captain Mecklin is back, Mr. Charlotte is back, our captain is back." Countless cheers, like waves, quickly spread throughout Machupi. Doberman, Yellow Bear, Gwen the Spotted Deer, Bancroft the Wind Wolf, and hundreds of others rushed out and surrounded Charlotte and others into Machupi. When Charlotte entered the Maze City, he found it much busier. Not only was the population nearly 30% more than when he left, but there were even dozens of more shops. He was about to ask what was going on when he saw Ross Bader from Bader Chamber of Commerce coming up to him with a smile on his face. Charlotte didn't punish him before, not because of any foresight, but because he was a time traveler. But he still felt a little uncomfortable when he saw this businessman. Just when he was about to scold him, he heard Ross Bader say, "After you left, I moved my whole family here, and asked all the merchants in Bader Chamber of Commerce to send people to open branches in Machupi. I also provided moving expenses for the brothers of the knights who needed to settle down, and brought their families to Machupi. The population of Machupi is now close to 20,000. Ross Bader looked flattering. Charlotte didn't say anything last time, but his heart was as cold as ice and snow. After Charlotte left Machupi, he learned from his mistakes and sent people to chase his family back. He gritted his teeth and invested all his wealth in Machupi. Machupi is now what it is now because Ross Bud has gone all out and used all his business skills. Charlotte asked a few questions casually and found out the truth. Suddenly, she had a feeling. Sometimes, pretending to be cool without saying a word can really work well. Chapter 223 Menelman in May. Although Charlotte was a civilian, he had fought several battles on the battlefield. He had played in the Army and Navy, and he knew that he could not bring all kinds of soldiers. So even though the population of Machupi was expanding, he only picked more than 2,000 people, and the rest continued to develop in Machupi. Another reason why he only brought 2,000 people was that the Purple Finch Knights had less than 3,000 people. If he had too many people, Claire Breton would be embarrassed. Moreover, the original Knights of Favonius did not have so many people. This time, Charlotte left Dorothy and Belissa in Machupi. He originally wanted to leave Anastasia with her, but Anastasia liked the battlefield more, so he brought Anastasia, Doberman, Yellow Bear, Gwen the Spotted Deer, and Bancroft the Wind Wolf. This time, Charlotte selected the most elite warriors, who acted very quickly and caught up with Claire Breton's main force a day later. Claire Breton's troops brought too much baggage, far more than what was needed to attack South Seraph, and their movements were extremely slow. Claire Breton had heard that Charlotte had won several battles in the Principality of Behemoth, but he had never expected that this guy could actually create such a large knight group of more than 2,000 people. He knew that the Knights of Favonius were originally the patrol troops of the Lucavero district. The patrol troops in various places were basically empty salaries, and it was considered good to have a few hundred people. Where did these 2,000 people come from? Claire Breton could not figure it out. However, Claire Breton was not the kind of person who pursued clarity in everything. The strength of the Knights of Favonius was a good thing for him. As for the fact that Dorothy did not show up, he was extremely impressed. After all, he and Abner Surmai were good friends, and Abner did not want his sister to go to the battlefield. Claire Breton wanted to tell Charlotte to leave Dorothy in the Silver Pigeon Castle, but Charlotte did not expect that Dorothy would leave Dorothy in Machupi. Claire was very satisfied with this incident and also gained Abner's favor. They all thought that Charlotte felt that Machupi was close to Strasbourg, which made it convenient for Dorothy to go home at any time. In short, this was not a particularly big misunderstanding. The army soon arrived at the Silver Pigeon Castle. Claire Breton was not greeted by Baron Febele, but by a person whom Charlotte had never thought of but always thought about in her heart, Menelman Surmai. The first rose of the empire was still graceful and handsome, leading a force of hundreds of people, waiting for their arrival outside the Silver Pigeon Castle. Charlotte didn't have any admiration for her, but this senior was his most reliable thigh after traveling through time, and without Menelman's promotion, he wouldn't be where he is today. When they met Menelman, Claire Breton and Abner Surmai were much more excited than Charlotte, and their attitudes were as humble as two puppies wagging their tails. Before Charlotte could go up to say hello, she saw Claire Breton handing over a large amount of baggage in the army, including the civilians who transported the baggage, to Mettleman. He suddenly realized that this senior's days in the Navy were probably not easy. This also explained why Claire Brittany had to stay in Strasbourg for so long. He also brought supplies far beyond what was needed for the attack. It turned out that these supplies were for Mettleman. Before Mettleman left, he noticed Charlotte and waved, motioning him to come over. Charlotte was very nervous and approached the senior. She heard Mettleman whisper, "Come on." Charlotte nodded vigorously. Mettleman didn't say much and turned to leave. Charlotte couldn't help but say, "If you pass by Cappadocia, you can go up to replenish supplies. I have a little power there." Mettleman nodded slightly, leaving the three men with different moods, taking supplies and his own troops, and soon disappeared outside the Silver Pigeon Castle. There are many rivers in the Silver Pigeon Castle, and it is not far from the sea. If you continue forward, you will see several famous port cities in the Fars Empire. Mettleman's fleet should stay in one of them. Although Charlotte had guessed it, at this moment, she realized how much the Imperial Rose incident affected Mettleman, and he even had to raise supplies by himself. Claire Brittany patted Charlotte on the shoulder, put his arm around his shoulders with Abner Sumai, and whispered, "This matter cannot be known to anyone." Abner Sumai didn't say anything, but just glanced at Charlotte. Charlotte sighed and said, "Mettleman is my senior and the one who promoted me. I am willing to do anything for her except betraying Anne." This answer satisfied the two men. Charlotte seemed to have made it clear that he was not an admirer, but a different position. Especially Claire Brittany. He patted Charlotte on the shoulder again and said, "The past is the past. Anne is a good girl. I will fully support you." These words were very meaningful. Charlotte was shocked. The three of them had just completed the deepest level of communication and confirmed the tacit understanding that they would stand on the same line, when they saw a pink light in the distance, passing through the sky, then turning slightly in the air and falling straight to the ground. Claire Brittany and Abner Sumai's faces changed drastically, and they shouted, "Holy steps!" Charlotte was more familiar with the pink fighting spirit in them, and shouted, "It's Princess May. Princess May Guillaume." This sentence made Claire Brittany and Abner Sumai's faces change drastically, and turned into a face full of fear. They shouted together, "Many is in danger." The two of them urged the fighting spirit together, turning into two stormy air currents with lightning, and rushed out of the team. Charlotte hesitated for a moment, and said to several of his men, "I'll go and see too." He knew that Princess May had a grudge against his senior sister, although this grudge came a little out of nowhere. This eldest princess would even vent her anger on him, let alone encounter Mettleman herself? This is the grudge for killing her husband? There is a saying in the eastern country where Charlotte lived in her previous life, "The hatred of killing your father, the hatred of taking your wife." This sentence is used to describe the depth of personal hatred. Presumably, on the other hand, the fact that her husband was killed by Zimmerman in a duel must be a lifelong grudge that this widowed princess will never let go of. This princess always wears a black robe when she goes out, and she refuses to show her face. She has no other hobbies except novels, and she doesn't associate with anyone. She must have been greatly hurt after her husband died. And her temperament has changed drastically. Well, Mr. Charlotte Mecklen has had a personal experience. He has been thrown onto an enemy warship, thrown into the sea, and threatened with whales by this princess. There is also the miserable life of being forced to recite novels. Speaking of traveling with this Princess May, that was the most painful day for Charlotte since she traveled through time. Counting the days before she traveled through time, it was also the most painful day, and it was the most painful day in her two lives combined. Even now, there is a team of fast-handed clerks and fast-horse manuscript delivery people in his team. The sequelae have not been eliminated yet. Charlotte is a little worried about senior sister Mettleman, but he also knows that his worry is useless. After all, he is just an ordinary mid-level extraordinary. Princess May was about to get mad, and Claire Brittany and Abner Sumai, two high-level extraordinary people, could still play a role. What could he do? He shouted from the side, "Stop fighting." She had a strong flavor of a heroine in a romance novel. Charlotte's light agility x2, plus the spirit spider technique, and even the wings of the young dragon, were still far inferior to the two high-level extraordinary people. Whether it was Claire Brittany or Abner Sumai, they were completely different from the high-level people he had encountered before. There was also a difference between high-level people. The 13th level and the 18th level could never be the same. Practicing ordinary secrets and the top knight inheritance in the old continent could not be at the same level. Claire Brittany and Abner Sumai practiced a top knight inheritance in the old continent. The two had just broken through the 18th level and were only one step away from being promoted to the saint level. No matter how Charlotte pushed the secret method, she was still getting further and further away from the two people in front of her who were rolling up thunder and storms. When he arrived at the scene, Claire Bradini and Abner Sumrei were already standing behind Menelman, drawing their rapiers, ready to fight for the first rose of the empire. Princess May, dressed in a black robe, still looked cold and aloof, standing on the opposite side of everyone, like a plum blossom that still blooms proudly on a snowy day. But almost everyone knows that Princess May alone is the strong side. An army of hundreds of people is the weak side. Charlotte panted and supported his knees. The two sides hadn't started yet, so there should be some opportunities. He was ready to try his strategy. Although he was not Sukin or Zhang Yi, he was very confident in the world of his previous life and the knowledge accumulated by his time traveler. Just as Charlotte was about to speak, she heard Princess May say, "All the bookstores in the Principality of Behemoth don't have the two books you mentioned. Have you been lying to me all the time?" Charlotte didn't expect that her efforts in brewing lines would become the focus of the whole audience. With Princess May's words, everyone's eyes, including Menelman, were focused on him. Claire Bradini even asked with live language, "What book?" Abner Sumrei made a gesture to express his doubts. For a moment, Charlotte wanted to say to everyone, "I came to the wrong place. I'm leaving now. Just pretend I haven't been here, okay?" These are 3 sentences. Princess May didn't wait for Charlotte to answer, and said lightly, "I have important things to do now. The book matter, we will explain it when we return to Strasbourg." Charlotte roared in her heart, "What do you mean by we? Who said we? We are not we," but he really didn't dare to say it out loud, for fear that Princess May would suddenly venture anger and kill him first. This eldest princess is very crazy. Even the Holy Order of the Blood Clan said that the blood core was dug out, so the blood core was dug out. Princess May turned to Menelman and said, "It was thanks to this guy that he lied to me that 2 novels were only published in the Principality of Behemoth, so I came here to look for the original version of the novel. I didn't expect that we would meet on such a narrow road. This is the first time we meet, right, Miss Menelman Sumrei, or do you like another name, Miss First Rose of Fars?" Menelman said lightly, "Stop talking nonsense, Princess May Guillaume, draw your sword." Princess May smiled slightly, and was about to make a few more sarcastic remarks, when she saw Menelman's whole body full of strong fighting spirit like the night. His feet slowly left the ground, and the light on the long sword also turned dark. Under the cover of the dark night, a strange full moon emerged. Dark breathing method. Meditation technique of the Black Moon Goddess. Menelman has actually been promoted to the saint level. Everyone present couldn't help but get excited. Charlotte was not excited, he was just stunned. Menelman is the most talented knight. Everyone knows it. Although the charm of the first rose of the empire has always been suppressed by her lawless fiancé Zimmerman Axelrobin, who dominates the entire old continent, her charm, her talent, and her talent are still unconcealed. Menelman has always been the first rose in the eyes of young men in Fars and even all the countries in the old continent. But at this moment, Menelman also proved that she not only has beauty, but also has the strength to match her unparalleled beauty. Princess May smiled gently, and suddenly turned into pink light and rushed towards Menelman. The night and pink collided in the air. In an instant, there was a crisp sound of air bursting, lingering endlessly, like a light thunder in summer. The 3 men on the ground, even if they wanted to, were powerless to interfere with this duel. Because they were not saints, they could not take off. Charlotte never kept the floating world flower by her side, because although it could fly, every time it took off, it would adjust countless petals, which was too fragile. Each petal was an aku, and he was not very willing to use it. At this moment, even if Charlotte wanted to help, it was impossible. Even if he had the floating world flower in his hand, he could not interfere with this level of battle. That was a duel between the 2 most famous ladies in the old continent. This duel was about both victory and defeat, and, Tsundir. Princess May turned into a colorful rain of flowers, and countless tiny petals appeared in her pink fighting spirit. It was the first time that Charlotte saw the eldest princess really take action. When she dealt with the 2 blood clan saints, her fighting spirit did not change so coolly. Princess May's fighting spirit really echoed an ancient poem on earth. The east wind blows thousands of flowers at night, and blows down plums like rain. Menelman's fighting spirit was like a dark night, with a demon moon in the sky, and his body seemed to be one with the night, dancing in the moon. Charlotte had never seen such a battle and such a beautiful scene. It also reminded him of another ancient poem on Earth. The moon in front of the window is the same as usual, but it is different with plum blossoms. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 224 The Power to Decide Your Own Destiny. The more beautiful the plum blossoms are, the colder the black moon is. The more lonely the plum blossoms are, the misty the moon is in the dark night. Charlotte was originally worried that senior sister Mecklenburg, who had just been promoted to the saint rank, might not be a match for Princess May. But soon he found that he probably didn't know senior sister Mecklenburg well enough. Mecklenburg Sumri was definitely not a new saint rank. She just kept hiding her strength. In the entire old road, Mecklenburg Sumri and Princess May Guillaume can be regarded as the first echelon of the saint rank. If we only talk about female saints? Okay. Charlotte Mecklenburg is shallow-minded, and he doesn't know many female saints. Anyway, he thinks that Sister Karen is far inferior to senior sister Mecklenburg and Princess May. If there's a bucket of popcorn at this time, that's too crazy. Claire Brittany and Abner Sumri will definitely beat anyone who eats popcorn at this time. No matter whether it's a man or a woman. No matter old or young. Claire Brittany suddenly said, Princess May is not using Red Dragon Fighting Key. Hattingen Thunder and Storm University is the school with the most great knights. Whether it is Thunder Knight or Storm Knight, they are all the top knight inheritances in the old world. Only the University of Tübingen, founded by the Eblerholm clan, which is known as the first knight clan of vampires, can be compared with it. However, in the old world, it does not mean that there are no other top knight inheritances. For example, the Red Dragon Fighting Key of the Ingrimer royal family and the Frost Dragon Fighting Key of the Landmarlock family are also top knight secrets, but these knight secrets will no longer be circulated among the people. Although Charlotte has been to university, he does not know much about the affairs of the nobility. He has always thought that Princess May practiced Red Dragon Fighting Key. Although it is a bit pink, it is in the same color system and should be about the same. Hearing what Claire Brittany said, he couldn't help but ask, is it really not the Red Dragon Fighting Key? Abner May interjected, definitely not. He took a deep breath and whispered, if Claire and I are not mistaken, this fighting key should be created by Princess May herself. Claire Brittany also responded, I think so too. This princess is really a genius, not inferior to Mecklenburg. Charlotte could hear that Claire Brittany was trembling slightly when he said this. He obviously didn't want any woman to surpass Mecklenburg. Charlotte didn't want to dwell on this, so she asked, who will win? Abner Sumri answered decisively, I don't know. He looked up at the sky and added, Mimi must have hidden her strength for a long time. No one knows when she was promoted to the saint level, but she was definitely not promoted recently. This dark fighting spirit is thick and solid, at least above the 21st level. Princess May's strength is definitely above Mimi's, but she created her own fighting spirit secret method. This secret method is still a little bit imperfect, so there are often tiny flaws in battle. For now, it is not as well tempered as the dark fighting spirit, but in the future, Claire Brittany added, the future is limitless. This Princess May will definitely be able to stand at the top in the future. As a knight, I am a little ashamed. Charlotte was slightly relieved. He didn't want anything to happen to senior sister Mecklenburg. Inexplicably, he didn't want anything to happen to Princess May. The three men were powerless to intervene in the duel. They looked at the sky anxiously. Two beams of fighting spirit were flying in the sky, chasing each other. The clouds in the sky were torn into pieces by the two beams of fighting spirit. Occasionally, they collided and produced thunderous roars. Charlotte's neck was sore from watching, so she just lay on the ground. At this moment, a very beautiful face covered the sky. Charlotte was startled and shouted, Anastasia. Why are you here too? Anastasia smiled slightly and asked, can't I just watch the fun? Charlotte was speechless. It seems, can she? The illegitimate daughter of Baron Fell, with her hands on the two swords at her waist, looked up at the sky, her face full of envy, and her heart was extremely excited. She kept imagining how great it would be if she could be so strong. Anastasia thought she was already very strong. Among her peers, there were not many who were stronger than her, but compared to Mecklenburg and Princess May, she was still not strong enough. Anastasia was extremely eager for power. She didn't care about love at all. She just wanted to have the power to decide her own destiny. Charlotte looked around and found that almost all of his men had come. After all, Charlotte's men were all extraordinary at this time. Even Dubin was promoted to the second-level extraordinary during this period, and his swordsmanship also improved by leaps and bounds. With Charlotte leading by example, his men lay on the ground one after another to watch this rare extraordinary battle. Claire Brittany and Abner Sumika couldn't put down their faces. This was too indecent. What's more, both of them were high-level extraordinary. They didn't raise their heads for such a short while and their necks would ache. They still maintained a standing posture. This battle lasted for several hours. Until the night was slightly rising, the two fighting spirit lights collided violently after crossing each other. After separating, they didn't continue to circle. Looking from the ground, two groups of fighting spirit lights in the sky were like beams. They held each other quietly for a moment, and the pink fighting spirit light shot towards Strasbourg. A few minutes later, Mendelman was shrouded in darkness, and the moonlight sometimes appeared and sometimes disappeared in the darkness, floating on the ground. She was down to earth, and all the strange signs transformed by the fighting spirit disappeared. The first rose of the Empire said nothing, just said hello to Claire Brittany, Abner Sumai, and Charlotte Mecklen, and then silently led the team to continue on the road. Claire Brittany watched Mendelman's team leave, and then took Abner Sumai and Charlotte and others, turned back to reunite with their own team, and entered the Silver Pigeon Castle. Everyone didn't want to talk along the way, and each had something on their mind. After entering the Silver Pigeon Castle, Charlotte realized that Baron Fabali was gone, and he couldn't continue to be because his property was always lost. Now the Baron only has real estate in Strasbourg. He left the Silver Pigeon Castle in tears and went back to cry to his queen sister, wanting to change a territory. However, the Baron didn't know whether he thought it was too troublesome or had the advice of an expert. But he actually left his knights in the Silver Pigeon Castle. The Silver Pigeon Castle had no master, and Claire Brittany unceremoniously requisitioned Baron Fabali's knights and handed them over to Anastasia. Charlotte was a little strange at first, but he soon figured it out. Anastasia graduated from Hattingen Thunder and Storm University and was a genuine junior of Claire Brittany and Abner Sumai. Graduating from the same university, this social relationship can often help people get extra help. Just like Charlotte was favored by Mendelman and promoted him. Dubin, who was also a second-level extraordinary and had never been to college, could only be a third-level sergeant of the 47th level. So far, he has not received any documents for promotion. Chapter 225, Archduke Joseph's Last Legacy. Dubin failed to get promoted. Not long ago, it was not Charlotte's fault. It's not that he didn't report it, but the superior agency had never approved it. But now this matter is Charlotte's fault. With his continuous promotion, he had already obtained the approval authority for many people's positions, including Dubin, although he had to go through some detours and could not be promoted directly. So Charlotte was able to easily give Anastasia the 41st grade first-level clerk and Belissa the 45th grade first-level assistant. Poor Dubin. Charlotte could swear to heaven that he was definitely not deliberately suppressing this loyal subordinate, he just simply forgot about it. Now Claire Brittany has 4 knights in his hands. One is the Purple Finch Knights, which he leads personally, and the other is the Maple Leaf Knights. This knight group was recruited by Claire Brittany and Abner Sumai personally, and was created from scratch. Claire didn't trust others, so he handed it over to his best friend Abner Sumai to lead. The other 2 were Charlotte's Knights of Favonius and the Knights of Silver Pigeon Castle, which Anastasia took over. This name was changed by Baron Fabali not long ago. The original name of this knight group was not called this. Claire Breton stayed in Silver Pigeon Castle for only 3 days, replenished some supplies, and then continued on his way. He gave almost all the supplies to Mendelman, and the supplies of the army at home were not sufficient. After replenishing supplies in Silver Pigeon Castle, the combat effectiveness of the knights was restored. Claire Breton replenished supplies by directly levying a fee in accordance with the terms of the Imperial War. Charlotte felt a little sorry for the people of Silver Pigeon Castle. After Claire Breton led his troops away, he personally led a team of the Knights of Favonius back to Silver Pigeon Castle and issued a compensation to all the people of Silver Pigeon Castle who were taxed. Although this compensation was not much, it made Charlotte once again gain more enthusiastic support from the residents of Silver Pigeon Castle. The people of the Silver Pigeon Castle who were taken to Machupi by him would occasionally go back and forth to purchase supplies and bring back news about Machupi, saying that there was no tax in Machupi, and the houses were almost free. It was just that Machupi was an abandoned fortress, and the living environment was far worse than that of the Silver Pigeon Castle, so no one wanted to live in Machupi. But this time, Charlotte deliberately came back to compensate the people of the Silver Pigeon Castle. No one knew that the money actually came from Baron Febele, although Baron Febele would never use the money on the residents under his rule. Almost all the people of the Silver Pigeon Castle believed that this was compensation paid by Charlotte out of her own pocket, and a small wave of settling in Machupi was born in the Silver Pigeon Castle. This was something Charlotte had never expected. After Joseph's death, the knights under his command fled back to Behemoth and gathered in Mostar Castle. There is still no nominal leader. After leaving the Silver Pigeon Castle, Claire Breton went straight to Mostar Castle. He wanted to take the last legacy left by Archduke Joseph. As long as he could gain control of this knightly order, the entire Principality of Behemoth would no longer have the power to resist him. Archduke Ferdinand had no descendants and was assassinated, so the empire handed over the Principality of Behemoth to his nephew, but after the death of Archduke Joseph, especially the death of Archduke Joseph's wife, the empire did not want to hand over the Principality of Behemoth. Although the nobles of the Principality of Behemoth did not want to be incorporated into the empire, they were scattered and each had their own way. Everyone wanted to make a profit, and everyone was unwilling to contribute. This matter was no longer up to them. In short, the current Mostar Castle was a mess. A few days later, Claire Breton led his troops into Mostar Castle. Charlotte was also a member of this army, and even the Knights of Favonius was an important part. Charlotte had never entered Mostar Castle. The last time he came, he was only outside the city and did not enter the city at all. This time, when he entered the capital of the Principality of Behemoth, he felt quite emotional. After all, he was a behemoth. However, not long after he entered the city, he saw the nobles swarming in. These nobles had fought several rounds of civil wars in order to fight for power, and at least dozens of people died. Charlotte listened to these nobles scrambling to win Claire Breton's support and attacking each other. After a while, she couldn't help but feel lucky for Belissa. If Belissa hadn't made a decisive decision and escaped from Mostar Castle, she would have been tortured to death by these nobles because of her status. Although Belissa was a little naive, she was not stupid. Sometimes she could make decisive decisions. She was just with the Duchess all year round, so she lacked some knowledge. Of course, because she was often with Grand Duchess Joseph, she was too knowledgeable in some aspects. Claire Breton had no interest in this group of local nobles in Behemoth. He ordered the soldiers to expel these rubbish, but asked Charlotte to call several leaders of Archduke Joseph's old subordinates to the Duke's palace for discussion. Charlotte received the order and only took Anastasia to the military camp in Mostar Castle. Today, Anastasia has abandoned her identity as the illegitimate daughter of Baron File, and no longer mentions the Behemoths or Lady Nansula. She has settled in Strasbourg and is now an authentic imperial clerk. Just like when Charlotte crossed over, a first-class clerk of the 41st class, a resident of the imperial capital. The gates of the military camp in Mostar Castle were closed. During this period, this knight group was also wooed by countless nobles, but most of the nobles could not promise them a future. These local nobles in Behemoth might not even have a future. This also led to the knight group being very wary. When Charlotte arrived at the barracks, he immediately announced his name. He shouted, "Leader of the Patrol Army of Lucavero District, Head of the Knights of Favonius, Director of the Political Affairs Bureau of Lucavero District, Special Commissioner of War of the Fars Empire to the Ingrima Empire, and Level 27 General Affairs Officer Charlotte Mecklin. Please ask the 3 captains of the Mostar Castle Knights to open the camp gate and follow me to see the Behemoth military Archon Claire Breton." Charlotte shouted 3 times in a row, but no one in the barracks responded. Charlotte did not hesitate to pull out the anti-space long-range rifle from his collar. He had returned to Machupi and had already taken back his most handy weapon. He mentioned bloody glory and shouted, "If you refuse to open the door again, I will blow up the door and enter on my own." This threat was not responded to either. Charlotte did not hesitate to pull the trigger, and a magic-breaking armor-blasting bomb blew up the gate of the barracks. This thing is a bit violent. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.